There's a phone ringing in the forest, but no signal. They say the worst part of working as a park ranger is the isolation. I've been stationed out in the back country of Olympic National Park for going on 5 years now. Isolation doesn't scare me. I actually like it. You learn to appreciate silence when the only noise around you is the wind pushing through the trees and the occasional far-off cry of a hawk. No, the worst part of this job is the weird stuff you can't explain. And I don't mean Bigfoot or ghosts. I mean people, or things that look like people, doing stuff that just doesn't make sense. It started 2 weeks ago on a Thursday, right as the sun was dipping low behind the tree line. I was doing a solo patrol up near Enchanted Valley, about a 6-hour hike from the nearest service road. No signal, no roads, no other staff out there. Just me, my pack, and a whole lot of forest. I was crossing a narrow ridge when I heard it. A ringtone, clear as day, echoing through the trees like it was coming from right behind the next switchback. Now, you're probably thinking, so what? Somebody dropped their phone. But I need you to understand something. There's no signal out there. None. No bars, no chance of connecting a call. And even weirder, it wasn't any ringtone I recognized. It sounded like an old-school rotary phone, that high-pitched mechanical bell sound like something from the 80s. I stood there for a second, thinking maybe it was a hallucination. I'd only had a protein bar and a cup of black coffee since 9 a.m., and I was running low on water. But then it rang again, closer. "Hello," I shouted instinctively, even though I knew how stupid that was. My voice bounced around the trees and came back to me empty. The sound cut off. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. I followed where I thought it had come from. Just a little detour, maybe 60 yards off trail. I didn't see a phone, just a small clearing surrounded by massive Douglas firs. There was moss growing over everything, the ground soft and spongy under my boots. And in the center, a dead deer. Its legs were twisted backward like it had fallen from a height, but there were no cliffs nearby. Flies buzzed around it, but not as many as you'd expect. Its body was bloated, but it hadn't been picked apart yet. That was off. Things don't last long out here. Bears, coyotes, even birds will pick bones clean in a day. But this deer looked untouched. I backed away slowly. My gut was starting to tighten, that kind of warning your body gives you before your brain catches up. Something was wrong. Back on the trail, I kept moving, fast. I didn't camp that night. I pushed past sunset until I hit the old fire tower. It's mostly abandoned now, but we keep it maintained in case of emergencies. Inside, I locked the hatch and laid my pack down. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or adrenaline. I kept thinking about that phone sound, that weird, perfect ringtone echoing through miles of woods. Who the hell would even have a rotary ringtone out there? I didn't sleep well. Around 3 a.m., I thought I heard it again, faint, just beneath the howl of wind scraping across the windows. Drink twice, then nothing. And when I checked the bottom of the tower in the morning, there were boot prints in the dirt, fresh ones, circling the base, but no one ever climbed up. I didn't leave the tower for a solid hour after sunup. Sat there with my thermos half full of lukewarm coffee, staring out the window like a damn coward, watching the trees shift in the wind, listening for anything. Footsteps. Rustling. That damn ringtone. But there was only silence. That kind of heavy silence that presses down on you like the forest is holding its breath. When I finally climbed down the ladder, the boot prints were still there. Muddy, sharp edges. Someone had walked in a full circle around the base of the fire tower. Not casually either. It was a tight pattern, like they were inspecting it. No prints leading away. Just that one perfect ring. Here's the part that really messed me up. They were my size. Same tread as my issued Danners. Same exact sole pattern. I checked my boots. Of course, they matched. That didn't make it less freaky. I told myself I must have walked that circle last night without realizing it. Maybe I had gone down to check something and just forgot. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I hadn't opened that hatch once. I'd been too busy watching the tree line, hand wrapped around the handle of my Leatherman like it was going to save me from something I couldn't even describe. I radioed base. Static. No surprise, I was still too far out. I decided to hike down early. I'd seen enough. Whatever was going on out here wasn't in the handbook. About 2 hours into the hike, I came across something else. A scrap of flannel caught on a low branch. Red and black checkered, torn stiff with old blood. Not a huge amount, just a smear, but enough to stop me in my tracks. I snapped a picture with the old Canon we still use for reports and bagged the fabric in a sample pouch. We get missing hikers sometimes. Usually, it's dehydration or someone thinking they can handle the weather in sneakers and a hoodie, but this didn't feel like that. Not even 20 minutes later, I saw smoke, thin and curling like a cigarette trail. I followed it. What I found was a tent. Just one. Small, green, faded. It wasn't in an official camping area. We don't even allow people this deep without permits, and I hadn't issued any this week. It was zipped up, perfectly neat, like someone had just stepped away to piss. "Park ranger," I called out. "If you're in there, I need you to answer. You're camping illegally." No reply. I circled it slowly. My boots made no sound on the moss, and I felt weirdly like I was trespassing on something sacred. That's when I noticed the phone. It was sitting right outside the tent flap, half buried in the pine needles. Old, black. Not a smartphone, a landline handset, the kind you'd see in a motel in the 90s. No cord, just the receiver. And I swear to God, the moment I looked at it, it rang. Loud, jarring. That same mechanical ding echoing through the trees, vibrating in my chest. I didn't touch it. I just backed away slowly. The tent was empty. I unzipped it with the tip of my knife and peeked inside. One sleeping bag, a pair of boots, a few old granola wrappers. No ID, no phone charger. But there was a notebook. I flipped through it, just fast glances. Most of it was gibberish, scribbles, words written over themselves a dozen times until the paper was nearly torn through. But one phrase was clear, written on the last page, scrawled so hard the pen bled through to the cover. "Don't answer it. It knows your voice." I didn't sleep that night either. Made it halfway back to base before I pitched my tent and zipped myself in like it would help. I kept the receiver in my pack. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe? Stupidity. But at 2:17 a.m., something stood outside my tent. I didn't hear it walk up. It was just there, shadow blotting out the moonlight. No breathing, no movement. Then the phone in my bag started ringing, and outside, something whispered, "I found you." I didn't move. Not for a full minute. I just sat there in my sleeping bag, frozen, with that ringing slicing through the silence like a blade. My heart was hammering so loud it felt like it was echoing outside the tent. I counted 5 rings before it stopped. Dead silence again. No footsteps, no rustling leaves. Just quiet. Then the voice spoke again, right outside the nylon. Only this time, it was my voice. "Hey," it said, "you dropped your radio." Exactly how I'd said it 2 days earlier to a couple of hikers who left theirs on a rock at Lake Quinault. I felt the blood drain from my face. My own voice. Not just similar, identical. Tone, rhythm, even the slight rasp from drinking too much coffee and not enough water. Then it said something I hadn't said. Something I wouldn't say. "You shouldn't have touched the phone." The zipper started moving slowly, carefully, not all the way down, just enough for whatever it was to peek through. I lunged forward and kicked hard. I don't know what I hit. It was solid, heavier than I expected. Something thudded backward into the dirt. I burst out, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, shining it in every direction. Nothing. No footsteps, no crash through the underbrush, just trees swaying gently like the forest had exhaled all at once. My tent flap hung open behind me. That damn phone receiver had tumbled out of my pack and lay face down in the moss. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just sat there, back against a cedar, knife still in my grip, staring into the dark. When the sun rose, I packed everything fast and made the final trek down to base. That's when things got even weirder. I made it back around noon. Base was empty. It's not unusual. Sometimes the other rangers are out on patrol or driving into town for supplies. But the door to the ranger station was unlocked, which was not standard. We always keep it shut and bolted, unless someone's inside. I stepped in. Everything looked normal at first. Coffee pot still half full, maps scattered across the desk, boots lined up by the door. But the air was off, too still, like it had been sealed in there for weeks. Then I saw the logbook, the one we used to sign in and out of shifts. My name was written in 3 different places with different timestamps. One entry said I signed back in at 8:47 a.m. Another said I'd checked out at 10:03. The last one, this is what made me feel sick, said I returned at 11:58 a.m. I had just walked in the door. I hadn't written any of those. I checked the camera feed. We keep a trail cam pointed at the main entrance, more for bears than people. I clicked through the stills until I found the timestamp for 8:47. And there I was, walking in. Same jacket, same pack, even the limp in my left leg from when I twisted my ankle 2 months ago. Except I hadn't been there. I was still on the trail. I stared at that image for a long time, tried to come up with a reason, something logical, a time delay, a glitch. Then the radio crackled. Not static, not a voice. It was the ringing, same tone, mechanical, distant, coming through the goddamn emergency comms channel. That line doesn't carry sound like that. It's a two-way system. You speak, you wait, they answer. But this time, the ringing just kept going. Then it stopped, and a voice, my voice, whispered over the line, "You brought it here." I haven't left the ranger station since. I locked every door, shuttered every window. There's something in the woods that sounds like me, walks like me, knows what I've said, and it wants me to pick up the phone. By the time the sun dipped below the trees that night, I'd barricaded myself inside the station with furniture, nailed 2x4s over the windows, even dragged the old vending machine in front of the front door. My hands were shaking the whole time, not just from fear, but from this crawling wrongness under my skin, like something had already gotten inside and was wearing me down from the inside out. I kept telling myself I just needed to wait for morning. The team would come back. The signal would come back. Maybe even a chopper sweep from search and rescue. Something. Anything. But night in the forest, it does something to your brain. You start thinking in circles. You start asking questions that make you sweat. Like, if it can copy my voice, how much else can it copy? I kept the receiver on the desk. I hadn't touched it since the night before, but I hadn't thrown it out either. It felt wrong to just toss it, like I'd be giving it permission to follow me. Or worse, to stay. It sat there like a dead thing, black and silent, but it felt like it was watching. I tried to distract myself, went through the emergency food rations, rotated the batteries on the radios, found myself flipping through the patrol logs, old ones, from before I even started working this park. That's when I saw something. Tucked between the March 2015 entries was a sheet of paper. A loose one, folded 3 times. Looked like someone had stuck it there to hide it. I almost tossed it aside until I noticed the handwriting. It was mine, but it wasn't my writing. The loops were too neat, the spacing was off, like someone had studied my penmanship and gotten almost perfect at mimicking it. At the top was one word, circled in thick ink, answer. Below that were several lines, like diary entries. Some were scratched out. Others had letters repeated over and over. If you answer, it learns you. If you speak, it listens. If you tell, it follows. Do not answer. Do not speak. It wears your face. It wears your name. I must have read that page 10 times, fingers digging into the desk. I didn't remember writing it. I know I didn't write it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that at some point, maybe even in my sleep, maybe even while staring out the window, something had borrowed my hand. I heard footsteps again around 1 a.m. Soft, measured. One after the other, crunching gravel right outside the station door. Then the ringing started again. Ding! But this time, it wasn't coming from the receiver. It was coming from outside. I grabbed the flashlight, killed the lantern, and crept to the side window. Through a crack in the boarded slats, I could see the edge of the clearing lit faintly by moonlight. Something was standing at the tree line. It was me. Same jacket, same build, same everything. Except its arms were just a little too long, and the head tilted a fraction too far, like it hadn't quite figured out how joints worked. It held something to its ear, the phone receiver, and it was laughing. Low, wheezing, like it was just learning how. The sound came out glitchy, broken, like a scratched record trying to play a laugh it didn't understand. Then it said my name. Not screamed, not whispered, just flat, like it was trying the sound out on its tongue for the first time. Tyler. I stepped back, my hand clenching around the flashlight handle. I couldn't breathe right. My chest felt like it was caving in. That thing out there had my face, my voice, my name. It said it again louder. Tyler. And then slowly it turned and started walking away. Not into the woods, not toward the trail, but directly into the darkness between trees where there was no path, moving stiffly, deliberately. And behind it for just a second, I saw others. Not clear shapes, just outlines, tall, thin, twisting through the trees like wind in human form. One of them stopped, turned back, and I swear it looked straight at me. Then the lights flickered in the station, once, twice, and went out. The backup generator didn't kick on. The phone on the desk, the one inside, began to ring. Ding, ding. I didn't answer, but I swear I could hear breathing on the other end. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at that phone, the old dusty receiver on the desk, while it rang over and over, louder than before. The kind of ringing that made the air vibrate, like it was happening inside my chest instead of outside my head. The lights were gone. No power. The emergency backup system hadn't failed in the 3 years I'd worked here. We test it every month. But tonight, dead. The air was colder than it should have been, even for a spring night in the Olympic forest. My breath clouded in front of my face. My knuckles were white around the flashlight handle, but I didn't switch it on, didn't want to see what might be inside with me. And still, the phone rang. Ding, ding. I counted 23 times. Then it stopped. Total silence. The kind that makes your ears ring like they're trying to fill in the gaps. I stood there, frozen. The longer I waited, the more the silence pressed in, like something was listening to me wait. And then click, the receiver clicked. No one had picked it up. It just answered itself. What came next wasn't a voice. Not really. It was static, but not radio static. It sounded wet, like breathing mixed with white noise, like someone gasping underwater through a speaker. I stepped back, knocking a chair over. Didn't care. That sound was alive. Then it spoke in my voice again, but warped, slowed down. Why won't you answer, Tyler? The way it said my name made my stomach twist, like it liked saying it, like it was tasting it. I turned and bolted to the back office, slammed the door, and shoved a filing cabinet in front of it. It wasn't going to stop anything that could mimic me and cut the lights, but it made me feel like I was doing something. There was an old rifle in the lockbox under the desk, standard issue for large predator emergencies. I grabbed it, checked it, loaded it. My hands were shaking so badly the shells clattered on the floor before I got them in. I sat there in the dark for what must have been hours. No sleep, just listening. At some point the phone started ringing again, only this time it didn't stop. And then the voices began. Not just mine, others. Some I recognized. Some I wanted to believe I recognized. Please, it's cold, don't leave me here. That one sounded like Grace, a ranger who went missing 3 years ago. They said she slipped in the river and got swept out to sea. They never found the body. Open the door, man. Come on, you know me. That voice was Ben. He worked in the Southern District, died last winter in a snowstorm. I attended his memorial. The voices just kept coming, a chorus of dead rangers and hikers and God knows who else, all begging, pleading, some crying, some laughing. One of them whispered, "It doesn't need to kill you, it just needs to be you." I think I passed out at some point. The next thing I remember is the morning light bleeding through a crack in the boarded-up window. The phone was silent. I opened the door slowly. Everything looked normal. Power was still out, but it was daylight now. I told myself that meant safety. I told myself that meant things only came at night. But then I saw the boot prints again, around the tower, around the cabin, and a fresh set leading away, identical to mine. I followed them about 40 feet into the woods. They stopped at the base of a tree. No sign of a struggle, no drag marks, just an ending. And in the crook of the roots, half buried in the dirt, was my Ranger ID, snapped in half. Like something had tried to throw it away, like it didn't need it anymore. I hiked out that day. Didn't stop, didn't eat, didn't drink. My legs cramped, my feet bled. I didn't care. I made it to a service road by sunset and flagged down a logging truck. The driver looked like he'd seen a ghost when I came stumbling out of the tree line. He said, "Jesus, you okay, man? You look like you saw yourself die." I didn't talk much on the ride back. The trucker, Clay, I think his name was, kept glancing at me like he wanted to ask questions, but didn't. Maybe it was the dried blood on my shirt or how I wouldn't stop checking the rearview mirror. Either way, he dropped me at the nearest sheriff outpost and peeled off like he couldn't get away fast enough. The station was warm, fluorescent, full of radio chatter and the smell of bad coffee. It should have felt safe. It didn't. They took my statement, nodded along, asked all the usual questions. Could you have been hallucinating? Was there anyone out there you didn't recognize? Any sign of animal activity? I gave them everything. The ringing phone, the dead tent, the voices, the doppelganger, the thing that moved like me, sounded like me, the footsteps, the way it whispered through the trees like it knew my bones. They nodded, wrote it down. Then they handed me a form saying I was being placed on mandatory leave for psychological evaluation. I didn't fight it. But I didn't go home either. I rented a room out in Forks near the edge of the park. Cheap little Airbnb above a gas station. You know the kind. Pine-scented soap, one window that won't open, paper-thin walls. I thought maybe a week there, away from the trees, would let my brain cool off. I told myself I'd wake up one morning, laugh at all of it, call someone from HQ, and admit I'd had a breakdown. But the first night, as I was brushing my teeth, I heard it again. Ding. It wasn't my phone. It wasn't any phone in the apartment. It was coming from the vent. I leaned down, heart sinking, turned off the faucet, listened. Dring. Then a voice whispering through the metal. "We're not finished, Tyler." I grabbed my bag and left that night. Drove to a motel 2 towns over. Paid in cash. Sat in the parking lot for an hour, just staring at the dark tree line off the highway. It's been 4 days. I've changed rooms 3 times. Burned the old receiver in a trash barrel behind a diner. Doesn't matter, it still rings. Not every night. Not always loud. Sometimes I just dream it, that cold mechanical tone echoing in an empty forest. But when I wake up, I swear I can still feel the vibration in the mattress. This morning I opened my laptop. There was a file on the desktop. No name, no folder. I didn't put it there. I clicked it. It was an audio recording. Just over 10 minutes long. The first half was silence. Then a click. Then a sound. Wet, wheezing, static-wrapped breathing. And then a voice. My voice, whispering, "I know where you're hiding, and soon they will too. You shouldn't have answered." I shut the laptop, smashed it against the wall, and left it behind. I don't know where I'm going anymore. I've been driving back roads for hours, stopping only for gas and coffee. Every so often, I look in the mirror and feel this rising panic that the person in the reflection isn't blinking when I do. I haven't slept, but sometimes I see myself standing in the woods along the road, waving. Sometimes I wave back, sometimes I don't. I think maybe it's already inside. Maybe that first ring was all it needed. Just enough to open something, not a door. Something worse. Something I can't close again. There are things in that forest that wear your voice like a mask, that crawl under your skin and learn how to be you. And the worst part? No one will believe you. Not until they hear the phone ring, too. So if you're ever deep in the trees and you hear a landline phone ringing from somewhere it shouldn't be, don't answer, don't speak, don't even breathe. Because it's already calling you by name, and it's not going to stop. Can you tell me what time you are listening to this video? How do you feel about my video? If you like, please like and subscribe, and comment to let me know. That is a great motivation for me. Thank you, guys. My last night's shift as a park ranger turned into a nightmare. They say nature heals. That's what all the wellness Instagram accounts scream at you, right? Go take a hike. Reconnect with the earth. Breathe. I used to believe that. Hell, I took the job because I believed that. But that was before I spent my last night at Black Hollow National Park, somewhere out past Helena, Montana. Not officially listed on tourist maps anymore. Budget cuts, they say, but the locals know it. Hikers still find their way in through old dirt roads and outdated apps. I'd been working night patrols there for about 6 months. It was never meant to be permanent, just something to reset my head after the divorce and a burnout spiral at my last job in Portland. You know, fresh air, quiet, time to think. It was late October. That kind of cold where the air bites you through your jacket and your breath fogs up the windshield even with the defroster blasting. My beat-up Ford Ranger rattled over the gravel access road leading up to the Northern Watchtower. You don't usually see much traffic up that way. The area is steep with switchbacks, loose rock, and no cell reception for miles. I logged into the station around 5:45 p.m., just as the sun dipped behind the ridge. It looked like a painting. Orange sky bleeding into purple shadows across the trees. It should have been peaceful, but the forest gets too quiet up there. No bugs buzzing, no owls calling, just dead, heavy silence. The cabin is one of those old-school ranger posts. Wooden frame, propane heater, a cot that feels like sleeping on plywood. I went through the usual routine, logged the shift start in the physical ledger, no network up there, checked the CB radio, made sure the generator had fuel. Everything was fine. About 8:30 p.m., I got a call on the handheld from Ethan, another ranger working a different sector. Yo, you copy? I got something weird over here by Elk Run Trail. Flashlight movement, but no cars in the lot. Might be lost hikers. You seen anyone up north? I hadn't. Not a soul since I passed the closed gate that afternoon. Nah, I replied. Haven't seen squat. You want me to loop down and meet you? He paused. No, stay put. Just weird. Might be kids messing around. I didn't think much of it. Halloween was close, and the woods attract dumb teens every year. An hour later, I heard knocking. Not at the door, not even on the cabin. It was under the floor. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not scratching. Not an animal knocking. I froze. My first thought was a branch, or maybe something fell underneath, like a rock slide shifting. But it didn't sound natural. It had rhythm. I grabbed my flashlight, unlatched the trapdoor that leads to the crawl space, and aimed the beam down there. Dust, old wires, a few black widow webs, but nothing else. I stared for a while, heart pounding like a jackhammer. Then I heard it again. Outside this time. Knock, 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 right under the wooden porch. I stepped back from the trapdoor and locked it. I told myself it was probably a raccoon or a coyote brushing up against the supports, but I knew how animals sound. This wasn't that. I radioed Ethan again. Hey man, you still near Elk Run? Something weird out here. Might be a prank, but it's getting under my skin. Static. Still nothing. Then the radio crackled, but it wasn't his voice. It was breathing. Just slow, wet, shuddering breath. I shut it off. Didn't even think. Just clicked it off, like that would somehow undo what I heard. I suddenly felt watched, like something was standing right outside the windows. The next few hours were a blur of paranoia. I kept circling the cabin with my flashlight every 10 minutes. Nothing. No footprints in the frost. No broken branches. Just a sense of being followed. Around 2:15 a.m., I saw movement on the ridge above the tower. A figure standing, watching, too far to make out details, but close enough that I knew it was a person. I shined the light toward them and shouted, "Hey, you need help? You're not supposed to be up there." No answer. They didn't move, not even an inch. The light hit them, but it was like it didn't reflect properly. I can't explain that. It was like the beam bent around them or got swallowed by their outline. I blinked, and suddenly they were gone. I didn't sleep. I stayed up, hand on my bear spray and survival knife, and eyes darting to every window like a dog during a thunderstorm. By morning, when I hiked down to the main station, Ethan wasn't there. His truck was still parked in the gravel lot. Door open, keys in the ignition, CB radio dangling out the side. No blood, no sign of a struggle, no tracks leading away. Just gone. They launched a search party. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers. Nothing turned up. Later that week, I went back up to retrieve my gear from the tower. Underneath the porch, scratched into the wood, were 3 letters. Run, carved deep, fresh. The Park Service never found Ethan. I filed my final report turned in my badge, and drove until I hit the Oregon coast, where the trees give you room to breathe. But sometimes when I hike alone, I still hear it. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, and I don't go hiking at night anymore. I didn't quit right away, I should have. I knew something wasn't right after that night, with Ethan gone, with the knocks, with whatever that figure was. But I stayed. Maybe it was pride. Maybe I just couldn't accept that the place I'd come to for peace had become something else. Something wrong. The official report on Ethan's disappearance was as sterile as you'd expect. Presumed lost in rugged terrain during patrol, likely injured and succumbed to exposure. No mention of the weird radio static, or the figure on the ridge, or the word run, gouged into the porch boards like someone dug it in with a broken bone. I asked the lead investigator about it. She didn't even flinch, just said, could have been there a while. We'll look into it. That was it. A week after Ethan vanished, they assigned me a temporary partner. Jeff, mid-30s, tall, ex-Army, had that quiet confidence you see in guys who've spent time in ugly places. We didn't talk much, which suited me fine. I still wasn't sleeping great. They had us patrolling Sector D, deeper into the park, past the fire roads, into the older trails that weren't open to the public anymore. The ones you only hiked with a map and a flare gun. Our shift started late afternoon. It was early November now. The days were getting short, and the temperature dropped fast once the sun slipped behind the trees. About halfway through our route, Jeff asked me, "So what really happened with your last partner?" I told him most of it. Left out the part about the breathing on the radio, left out the thing I saw on the ridge. I still wasn't sure if I'd hallucinated it or dreamed it, or if I was just unraveling. He didn't laugh or call me crazy. He just nodded slowly and said, "Weird happens out here sometimes." And then he told his story. 2 years back, he was working a wildfire containment line near Glacier National. His unit had to evacuate a section where some hikers had been reported missing, a father and daughter. The girl was 11. They found her shoe halfway down a ravine, but no blood, no tracks, no signs of a struggle. They searched for 4 days. On the 5th, one of the rangers was found in his tent with his boots on backwards and all his teeth missing. No sign of trauma, no blood, like they'd been taken out carefully. Official cause, sudden unexplained medical event. Jeff just looked at me and said, "When you're out here long enough, you start to feel it. The off spots. Places that don't want you there." About an hour later, we hit one of those spots. It wasn't on the map. Just a break in the trees that opened up to an old ranger shack that looked like it hadn't been used since the 70s. Moss on the roof, door half off the hinges. The air felt thick, stagnant, like the place was holding its breath. We should have turned around, but Jeff wanted to check it out. "Could be where someone's squatting," he said. "Last thing we need is some lunatic hiding up here with a shotgun." He pushed the door open with the barrel of his rifle. The inside smelled like rot and wet paper. There were old boxes stacked in the corner, the kind that used to hold maps and trail brochures, a broken cot, shattered lantern glass on the floor, some waterlogged notebooks on a shelf. But what I couldn't stop looking at was the wall on the far side of the room. Someone had scratched hundreds of tally marks into the wood. They covered the paneling from floor to ceiling. And in the center of it all, carved deep with something sharp, was the phrase, "It follows the ones who stay too long." Jeff took a picture of it with his phone, then froze. He held it up to me. "You seeing this?" The photo came out black. Just solid black, like the lens had been covered. He tried again. Same thing. Then the screen on his phone started flickering and went dead. He looked at me and muttered, "Nope, nope, not dealing with this crap tonight." We got out of there fast. Neither of us said a word for the next half hour. Just the sound of boots crunching on frost and wind pushing through the pines. We didn't finish our patrol that night. We reported a possible structure hazard and left it at that. The next morning, Jeff texted me. "I had a dream last night. The tall thing you said you saw, I saw it too, in the trees, just standing there." I didn't respond, mostly because I didn't know what to say. Later that day, a hiker turned up in Sector D, alone. Mid-40s, wearing a Patagonia jacket and a pair of Nikes. No backpack, no phone. He was just walking. When we asked where he came from, he didn't answer. Just stared at us with this blank, dry-eyed expression like he hadn't blinked in hours. The only thing he said, quietly, like he was trying not to be heard, was, "It doesn't want you here." Then he collapsed. EMTs took him to the clinic in Helena. I tried following up a few days later, but there was no record of him being admitted. Nothing. Jeff quit the next week. Didn't even give notice. Just packed his gear and drove off. Left me a voicemail. "Don't go back there. You hear me? Don't go back to that shack." I tried to stay out of that part of the park after that, but something about it kept pulling at me. Like it wasn't done with me yet. I don't think it's possible to understand how alone the woods can make you feel until you've worked them at night for weeks, months. Long after the birds have stopped singing, long after your own voice starts to sound foreign inside your head. After Jeff left, they didn't replace him right away. Staffing was low across the whole district, and I was senior personnel, which basically meant I was the last dumbass still willing to stay up there by myself. For a while, things were quiet. A couple of missing pet reports. One overturned camper van near Hollow Creek. A drunk guy who wandered into the park thinking it was a shortcut to his Airbnb. All normal stuff. But even then, something lingered. It was like a low hum just under my hearing, like the woods were always watching, even when nothing was happening. But then something happened that still makes my stomach turn when I think about it. It was a Thursday, mid-November. Cold enough that the river was starting to crust over in the shallow spots. I was assigned a solo shift at the South Ridge Tower. Different location from before, but still remote. It sits on a hill about 12 miles from the ranger station, overlooking the older growth areas that hadn't been logged in decades. GPS barely works up there, and there's only one trail in. I packed extra food, thermal gear, and brought a printed map with handwritten notes, something Jeff taught me before he left. I reached the tower around 4:30 p.m. The sun was dipping low, bleeding orange into the clouds. I remember the wind that day was strange, not loud, not sharp, just off, like it came from the wrong direction. Inside the tower, everything looked normal, nothing disturbed, no reports on the desk, no flagged sightings. I did a perimeter walk, checked the generator, and started my shift like any other night. Around 9:40 p.m., the radio popped. A sharp burst of static followed by a voice, low and uneven. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" It was a man's voice, maybe mid-30s, shaky but not panicked. I responded immediately. "This is Ranger Post South Ridge. Who's calling?" Silence. Then I'm lost. I was with a group, but I can't find the trail. I think I'm near a ridge. I see lights. I froze. There are no lights in the direction he was likely facing. No cabins, no campsites, nothing. Just dense forest and broken terrain. "What's your location? Can you describe what's around you?" I asked. His voice got quieter. "There's a static, old stairs in the ground. They go down, but there's no building." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. There are no stairs in this park. I asked him to repeat that, but the signal cut out completely. I tried calling him back, switched to the wideband Ranger channel. Nothing. Just dead air. I logged the incident and radioed it in to Central Dispatch. They told me to stay put and report if the signal returned. It didn't. But at 11:12 p.m., I saw something in the trees below the tower. It was subtle movement, just beyond the first row of pines. Not a person. At least, not any normal person. It was too still, not walking, just there. It didn't move like something alive, more like a shadow glitching into place, then vanishing behind a tree. I focused my binoculars on the spot. Nothing. A minute later, I saw it again. Closer. Same shape. Tall. Thin. Humanoid. But not quite right. The limbs were too long. Head too high. It was like a human silhouette drawn by someone who didn't know what people looked like. I stepped back from the window. Then my tower lights flickered. That had never happened before, not even in a storm. I checked the generator. It was humming. Fuel levels fine. But the lights kept blinking like something was drawing power or interfering with it. And then I heard it. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. not on the door. This time, on the metal stairs leading up to the tower. Clang, clang, clang. I grabbed the emergency rifle and crept to the door. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Something in my brain screamed not to. That if I opened that door, I wouldn't survive the night. Instead, I shouted, "Identify yourself! This is federal property!" Silence. Not even wind. Not even bugs. Then a whisper came through the radio again, nearly inaudible. "You stayed too long." I shut off the radio and backed away from the door. Rifle raised, eyes wide. My heart was pounding so loud I could feel it in my teeth. And then, slowly, something climbed back down the tower steps. I never heard it arrive, but I heard it leave. Metal groaned under the weight, one slow step after another. Clang, clang, clang. I waited until sunrise, locked inside that tower, too terrified to sleep. When daylight finally bled through the fog, I stepped out, weapon raised. There were no footprints, no drag marks, nothing on the stairs. But at the base of the tower, someone had left a pile of bones. Small ones, maybe rabbit or squirrel, stacked in a perfect pyramid, carefully balanced. No blood, no fur, just bones. That's when I knew this place wasn't just dangerous. It was aware. And I had the gut-deep feeling that whatever this was, it had noticed me. You ever feel like something's following you, even after you've left the place where it started? Like you've got a piece of something stuck to you. And no matter how far you drive, it clings. In the shadows of your room, in the corner of your eye, in the silence between your thoughts. After that night in the tower, I requested a reassignment. I told them I needed to be closer to base. Help with paperwork, coordinate trail maintenance, anything that didn't involve being alone in the woods after dark. The supervisors didn't ask questions. Truth is, a lot of us had that look by winter. Sunken eyes, short tempers, flinching at sounds we couldn't place. I spent the next week in the main ranger building near the visitor center. Daylight hours only, filing, cold coffee, trail reports. It should have helped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not in the building, but from outside. Like every window was a one-way mirror, and something was just beyond the glass, studying me. Then the dreams started. Every night, the same one. I'm in the woods, not hiking, not moving, just frozen. My body can't move. My eyes are stuck open, and I hear footsteps, wet ones, like someone walking through mud, circling me, breathing loud, ragged. And then I hear it. 3 knocks, always in the same pattern. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, sometimes with nosebleeds. I'd never had those before. By the 4th night, I started sleeping with the lights on. I didn't tell anyone at first, didn't want them thinking I was cracking. But then Anna, one of the newer rangers, came to me on a Monday morning. Her eyes were bloodshot. She looked shaken. I asked if she was sick, and she said, "I've been having these dreams, stuck in the woods, and I hear something knocking." She stared at me like she knew I'd had the same ones. I didn't answer, didn't have to. She just whispered, "I think whatever it is, it's spreading." That night, she checked into a motel 20 miles away, never came back. 2 days later, we got a call from dispatch. A solo hiker had gone missing again. Male, early 20s, on a photography trip. His car was found near the Hollow Creek trailhead, the same area where I saw the figure on the ridge. His gear was still in the trunk, car doors locked, windows rolled up, but his shoes were sitting neatly outside the driver's door. No footprints leading away, just gone. They sent me and 2 others to search, Mason and Kat, both solid people. Mason was ex-military, built like a linebacker, but quiet. Kat was new to our district, but had that sharp edge, like she wasn't scared of much. We started the search at sunrise. Cold fog clung to the ground like smoke. The trail itself felt wrong, like it was narrower than before. The trees leaned in just a little too close. Sound didn't travel right. Our radios worked, but the signal was spotty. Not unusual that far out, but it felt worse than usual. An hour in, Kat found something off the trail. A staircase. It wasn't built, it was unearthed. Old stone steps leading down into the ground, covered in moss and pine needles. Not part of any known structure, not on any map, just a set of stairs vanishing into shadow beneath the forest floor. I felt it the moment I saw them, like static in the air, like if we stepped down there, we wouldn't come back. Mason wanted to investigate, said it could be an old root cellar or storm shelter. Kat agreed, reluctantly. I stayed at the top. I just couldn't bring myself to go down. They took flashlights and descended slowly. The steps creaked under Mason's weight, not stone after all, but old rotted wood barely holding. Then the radio cut out. Their voices vanished. I shouted down, nothing. 5 minutes passed, 10. Then Mason's voice crackled back on. There's something down here. You need to see this. That's all I got. Against everything screaming in my head, I descended. 10 steps, then 15, then 30. It felt impossible, like I was going deeper than the height of the hill itself, and still no sign of the bottom. And then I heard something. Not voices. Knocking. But not from below, from above. Like something was now on the surface, trapping me down there. I turned around to go back, flashlight jittering in my hand. But the stairs behind me were gone. Just dirt. Solid earth where I had just stepped. No wind. No noise. Just cold. And then Kat screamed. It didn't sound human. It was raw, like something being ripped out of her throat. And then silence. Mason's voice came through the radio again, but different, shaky, not right. It sees us. Then it sees you. That's when I ran. I don't even remember how I got out. I blacked out. When I came to, I was on the forest floor, face down in pine needles, 30 yards from where the stairs had been. The stairs, gone, like they'd never been there. No Kat, no Mason. Just me, mud-streaked, alone, and with a buzzing in my ears like a swarm of wasps crawling inside my skull. I stumbled back to the station, barely able to speak. I told them what happened. They launched another search. Found nothing. Mason and Kat were added to the missing persons list. That night, I got a voicemail. No caller ID. Just a raspy voice whispering, "Don't come back." And then, knock, knock. I should have left. I knew I should have. I could have packed my things and disappeared like Jeff, like Anna, like all the smart ones who saw what was coming and got out before it swallowed them whole. But something had its hooks in me. I needed to understand what was happening. Or maybe, deep down, I wanted to see how far it would go. After Kat and Mason vanished, things changed around the station. The mood was different, tense, heavy. The kind of silence people wear when they know something awful's happened but can't explain it. Officially, their disappearance was written off as a terrain accident. Unstable ground, bad weather, poor visibility, the usual script. But nobody believed that. Not really. One morning, about a week after it happened, I was sorting through some old inventory logs in the back room, records dating back to the early 90s, and I found something odd. A handwritten file. No printed date, no signature. Just a plain manila folder labeled in red ink. D9 Incident, Confidential. There were 3 pages inside. The first page was a report from a ranger I'd never heard of, dated 1998. It described a situation eerily similar to mine. Reports of strange lights in the woods, an old staircase discovered near the Hollow Creek Basin, personnel experiencing shared dreams, auditory hallucinations. The second page listed names. 6 rangers, all marked dismissed or missing. One of the names was Ethan's last name. Another was Jeff's. But the third page is what made my skin crawl. It was a drawing. A child's drawing, if I had to guess. Crayon on lined notebook paper. It showed a tower in the middle of the woods. And standing next to it was a tall black shape, stick figure thin, with a circle for a head. No face. But next to the figure were 3 words scrawled over and over again in big, shaky letters. It watches us. I took the file straight to my supervisor, Scott. A ranger in his 50s, built like a retired linebacker, the kind of guy who rarely smiled unless he was talking about fishing. I expected him to brush me off, tell me it was just some archived prank. But when he saw the file, he went pale. Didn't say a word, just quietly folded it up and locked it in his desk drawer. I asked him what it was. "You've seen things out there?" he asked instead, not answering my question. I nodded slowly. He sighed and leaned back in his chair, looking out the window for a while. Then he said, "There's stuff out here we're not supposed to name, and places we're not supposed to go." He opened his bottom drawer and pulled out a bottle of something brown and expensive, poured 2 shots. "You didn't hear that from me," he said. "But if I were you, I'd get out while you still can." That night, I couldn't sleep again. I left my cabin around 2:30 a.m. and walked the short path toward the edge of the tree line behind the station. Sometimes just standing there helped, being near the trees without being in them. I don't know why, but this night was different because I wasn't alone. There was someone, something, standing at the edge of the woods. Not moving, not breathing, just standing. I knew it wasn't human, not by the way it was still, too still, like it wasn't even bound by gravity. It didn't have a face, just a round, pale head, like damp paper stretched over a balloon. Its arms were long, dragging near its knees. Its torso swayed slightly like a tree in the wind, even though there was no wind. And then it stepped forward, just once. I backed away slowly, trying not to blink. My feet crunched on frost. It didn't react. But then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Not from behind, not from the woods, from inside the station. I turned, adrenaline burning hot in my gut, and ran back toward the building. The lights were off, the windows dark. As I reached the door, it opened by itself, just creaked open slowly, like it had been waiting for me. I stepped inside, flashlight out, rifle ready. Nothing. Empty. Then I looked down the hallway that led to the lockers. The word "run" was scratched across the floor in deep gouges, like something had dragged claws or nails through the linoleum. No one else reported hearing or seeing anything that night. The next morning, when I showed Scott the gouges in the hallway, they were gone. Clean, like it had been scrubbed out. I even pulled up the security footage from that hallway. But around 2:33 a.m., the feed cut out for exactly 3 minutes. And when it came back on, there was just static. And then a single frame, a still image of the woods with me standing in the trees. Only, I hadn't gone that far in, and in the frame, just behind me was another figure. Tall, white head, no face. I blinked and the footage deleted itself. Just vanished. That was the final sign I needed. I packed that afternoon, wrote my resignation on a sticky note, and taped it to the inside of my locker. Didn't wait for approval. Didn't say goodbye. I drove 12 hours west and didn't stop until I hit the coast. But I still hear it sometimes. In the walls, in the trees behind my apartment. I even caught myself knocking in my sleep 3 times. Slow, deliberate. Like it's waiting. Like it's reminding me, you don't leave the forest. It follows. It's been 6 months since I left Black Hollow. I live in a small coastal town now, tucked away between cliffs and ocean spray. Tourists pass through, ask where the best coffee is, take selfies with the lighthouse. Normal life. I tried to move on, got a job at a boat rental place, started therapy, even adopted a mutt named Jasper from the local shelter. He barks at everything, pisses on my rug, and keeps me grounded. Most days, it almost feels like the nightmare back in Montana was just that, a nightmare. But then the letters started. No return address, no stamps, just folded paper slipped under my door in the middle of the night. The first one said, "You left them behind." The second, "It still sees you." And the third one, that one was a hand-drawn map of Black Hollow, but it was wrong, skewed, warped, trails bent at angles that don't exist, rivers in places that should be dry. And at the very center, marked in red ink, was one word, below. I burned that one in the sink. But I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. I kept thinking about the staircase, about Mason, Kat, Ethan, Jeff, all the ones who vanished, all the warnings we ignored, all the things we weren't supposed to see. Then about a week ago, I got a call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Wish I hadn't. It was Scott. His voice was brittle, like he hadn't spoken in days. I could barely hear him over the static. "They're reopening the Hollow," he said. "They're building a new fire tower near Sector D. Says it's for wildfire monitoring. But that's not what it's for. It's coming back up," he whispered. "They're letting it out." I asked what he meant. Who was they? What was it? But all I got was a sound I hadn't heard in months. Knock. Then the line went dead. I called the ranger station back immediately, but the number was disconnected. The next morning, I checked the news. A fire had torn through the northern part of Black Hollow. Unexplained ignition. Several acres destroyed. 3 rangers missing. 1 presumed dead. Scott's name was among them. That night, I had the dream again. But this time, I wasn't stuck in place. I was running, through the trees barefoot. My lungs were on fire, and behind me I could hear it. Not footsteps, not breathing, but knocking, louder than thunder, like the trees themselves were pounding the ground, like the earth was knocking back. I didn't wake up screaming. I woke up outside, in my front yard, barefoot, dirt on my hands, and carved into the bark of the pine tree near the road in long, deep gouges were 3 symbols. No knife could have done that. Not clean like that. I keep the windows locked now. Don't go near the woods. I sleep with the lights on. Alarm set. Jasper curled up against the door. But I know it's just a delay. Just noise to keep my brain busy. Because some things don't stay buried. Some forests don't let you leave. Not really. I think about all the stairs hidden under moss, under roots, under time. Forgotten trails, buried secrets. Paths that lead straight down into the dark. I wonder how many people have heard it, how many ignored it, how many stayed too long. And when I wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, throat dry, ears ringing, I hear it again. Every time, always the same. Knock. 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 I read the logs from a ranger who went missing in 1997. I used to work for the National Park Service. Not going to say which park because I still have friends out there, but I'll tell you this much. It was one of the bigger ones. Vast, dense, beautiful. And if you've ever stood out there past sunset with nothing but wind in your ears and trees creaking like old bones, you'll understand why some folks don't come back. It started when I transferred from the visitor center to field patrol, the solo kind. You hike trails, log damage, check for signs of campers where there shouldn't be any, monitor the fire risk. Most of it's boring as hell. Lonely, but peaceful. Then one afternoon, I found a locked drawer in the back of our ranger cabin. It was wedged behind an old map case, barely noticeable. I asked around. No one seemed to know who had the key or what was inside. But one of the older rangers, a guy named Ree, just stared at me too long when I brought it up. Said some drawers don't need opening. Then walked off. I didn't let it go. A couple nights later, I stayed late after my shift, waited till the station emptied out, and used a crowbar from the shed. Took some effort, but the drawer finally gave. Inside were a bunch of notebooks, water-stained, half-moldy, reeking of mildew, and that weird dusty smell like they hadn't been touched in decades. They were field logs, handwritten, labeled Ranger Howell, and dated 1996 to early 97. Thing is, nobody by that name worked here. Not on any of the rosters, not on any park memorials. Like the guy didn't exist. But the notes were real, and the more I read, the worse it got. January 3rd, 1997, patrolled West Ridge. Found shredded sleeping bag near old fire pit. No gear, just blood. Tagged the site. Filing report later. January 9th, same section. Heard someone coughing deep in the trees. Didn't investigate. Had a weird feeling. Not scared exactly, just not alone. January 15th, saw a man watching me from the ridge above Coldwater Bend. Tall, lanky, couldn't make out his face. Waved. He didn't wave back. At first, I thought it might be a prank. Some junior ranger trying to spook us. But the logs kept going in neat, sharp handwriting, getting more fragmented, more paranoid. He'd scrawl pages about footprints that circled his cabin at night, about whispers that sounded like his own voice echoing through the trees. He started sleeping with a hatchet. Said he found animal bones arranged like signs outside his door. By the time I hit the March entries, my stomach felt like it was clenching itself inside out. March 4th, found a boot, just one, half buried in snow, foot still inside. March 6th, radio dead, nobody answers. I walked to the tower, but it's empty. Everything's empty. Then the logs stopped. No final page, no goodbye, just a smear of what looked like dried mud on the last entry. And that was it. I put the journal back in the drawer and didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I asked our head ranger if he'd ever heard of a Howell. He said no. Told me the name didn't match anyone who ever worked in the region. But later that week, I drove to a nearby ranger outpost for a supply pickup. Got talking with an old guy at the front desk. Retired ranger. Came in every now and then for coffee. Just made small talk until I casually mentioned the name Howell. His smile vanished. He leaned in, lowered his voice, and said, "Don't mess with that. Howell's the one they never found. He stayed too long in Sector 9, alone." I didn't know what Sector 9 was. That area wasn't marked on any of our official trail maps. I asked him where it was. He didn't answer. Just sipped his drink, stared out the window, and muttered, "They don't print it on maps for a reason." I went back to work like nothing happened, did my usual rounds, made my reports, drank too much coffee from the old Keurig that tasted like cardboard and burnt rubber. But something had changed. I started watching the tree line more, listening too long to sounds I used to ignore. Every crack of a branch in the underbrush made my heart race. I couldn't stop thinking about that drawer, about Howell, about the old man whispering Sector 9 like a curse. A few days later, I waited until shift change and snuck into the archive shed. The old one, no one really used anymore. Found a busted file cabinet in the back full of mildewed papers and manila folders that looked like they hadn't seen daylight since Clinton was in office. Took me almost an hour of digging before I found it, tucked inside a water-stained folder labeled Unverified Trails. West Quadrant. A hand-drawn map. No coordinates, no legend, just scratchy outlines and a single label scrawled in faded red ink. S9. There it was. Sector 9. Off trail. No roads. The closest access point was a half-mile from the Ranger roads, way past Pine Loop, deep in a zone we were technically not even supposed to patrol solo. But it was there. Not a myth. Not something Howell made up. And like an idiot, I decided to go. I told my supervisor I was doing an overnighter at Riverbach to survey for erosion damage. Signed out a sat phone, packed light, just enough gear to make it through a cold night. My truck couldn't make it past the old logging trail, so I hiked the rest. Took me 4 hours of dense brush, uneven terrain, and the kind of silence that makes you question whether the world just forgot about you. I found the boundary marker just before dusk, a splintered wooden post half swallowed by vines. Someone had carved S9 into the side, deep and ragged, like they were in a rush. Beyond that post, everything felt off. The air was colder still. Not dead silent, but quieter. Birds didn't chirp. Insects didn't buzz. I didn't even hear the wind anymore. Just this weird ambient hum in the back of my skull, like a headache was trying to start. That first hour in the zone, I felt watched. Not from one direction either, like I was being sized up from every angle, all at once. You ever walk into a room and know someone had just been talking about you? That heat in the spine. Multiply that by 10 and make it last for miles. I kept hiking, telling myself I was being paranoid, tired, maybe dehydrated. But when I reached the small clearing where I planned to camp, I stopped dead. There was a structure, not a cabin, not a ranger post, just a crude shack made of splintered timber and rusted sheet metal, partially collapsed, half covered in ivy. No windows. The door was barely holding on by one hinge. I didn't go in right away. I circled it slow, looking for footprints, tracks, anything. But the ground was dead around it. Not trampled, not soft, like nothing had moved in or out in years, except the door. It was open, freshly. The top hinge was still swinging gently when I got close. No breeze, no animals, just that quiet metallic creak. I stepped inside, holding my flashlight low. Dirt floor, empty cans in the corner, a ratty sleeping bag shoved against the far wall, and in the center of the shack, surrounded by a ring of dark ash, was a ranger's hat. I picked it up. The inside band was still stained with sweat, old but preserved, and stitched on the tag, nearly faded to nothing, were the letters, H. Howell. I remember hearing something right then. A crunch outside, soft, deliberate, like a footstep on dry pine needles. I turned off the flashlight, sat completely still. Another crunch, then silence. I don't know how long I waited. Could have been a minute, could have been half an hour. But I didn't hear anything else. When I finally stepped out of the shack, the trail behind me was different. The bushes were pushed in. Branches snapped waist high. Someone had been there, standing just outside, watching. I slept with my knife open and my sat phone pressed to my chest. And I didn't sleep long because just after 2 a.m., I heard the crunching again. Closer. This time it circled the shack. Slow, deliberate, like whoever or whatever was out there wanted me to hear it. The footsteps didn't stop. They just kept pacing around the shack, soft, steady crunches like someone was walking barefoot on dry needles and gravel. Not running, not sneaking, just circling over and over. At first, I thought it was a bear or a cougar, but there was a pattern to it, a rhythm. 3 steps, pause, 5 more, pause, then 2 quick ones, like a shuffle, then nothing for several seconds. It was too deliberate. I didn't move, didn't even breathe hard, just gripped the knife and sat there with the sat phone in my lap, trying not to panic. The phone had no signal, by the way. Dead weight. Might as well have been a brick. I tried to text anyway. In S9, possible stalker, send backup, but the bar never filled. The message sat there, stuck on sending. Around 2:47 a.m., the steps stopped altogether. But I didn't hear anyone walk away. No crunching retreat. Just silence. That unbearable stillness again, like the air itself was listening. And then came the knock. One single tap on the shack wall. Not the door. The wall directly behind where I was sitting. I nearly pissed myself. It was knuckles, not claws, not a branch falling. A clear, deliberate knock. Just once. And then a voice. It was low, hoarse, like someone who hadn't had water in days. A man's voice. "You took my hat." I froze. Every hair on my arm stood up like needles. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. It was quiet. Calm. Like he'd been standing there all night, just waiting for me to realize it. I didn't answer. I didn't even look. The voice didn't come again. No more knocks. I sat in that goddamn shack until daylight bled in through the cracks in the walls and the birds finally started chirping again. When I opened the door, no one was there. No tracks. No signs of anything or anyone except the trees. The trees around the shack weren't right. I know how that sounds, but hear me out. They were bent inward toward the clearing, like something had been leaning on them. Like a dozen tall figures had stood just out of view all night, hunched into the canopy. And then I saw the tree closest to the shack. Someone had scratched into the bark with something sharp. Maybe a hunting knife. Maybe fingernails. I stepped up and read it out loud without meaning to. Stay with me. The shack. The logs. The hat. Howell never left. I didn't eat, didn't drink, just packed up and hiked out as fast as my legs would take me. The whole way back, I felt eyes on me, and every 30 minutes or so I'd hear movement, quick and light, just behind me, just far enough that I couldn't turn fast enough to see it. Once, I swear I heard my own voice say my name. Not someone calling my name, saying it, like a statement, like this is who you are now. When I made it back to the Ranger Road, I damn near collapsed. My knees were shaking, my lips cracked from dehydration. My sat phone started pinging signal again. And the message I'd tried to send the night before had failed. It didn't bounce back, just disappeared, like it never left the phone. I didn't report what happened. What was I supposed to say? That a ghost ranger whispered through the shack wall and tried to get me to stay? That I heard footsteps all night and found trees bowing inward like they'd been watching me? Even if I tried to tell someone, they'd just say it was fatigue. Paranoia, too much time alone in the woods. Hell, maybe that's all it was. Except when I got back to the main station, I made a mistake. I went back to the drawer, back to the logs. But this time, when I pulled them out, there was an extra journal on top. Newer, cleaner. My name was on it in handwriting that wasn't mine. Inside was only one entry. You came to me just like the others. You know the woods better than anyone. You belong here. You understand. The world outside doesn't want you. Stay. Just stay. And on the second page, written in faint red ink, I took your message. I'll answer next time. I quit 2 days later, didn't give notice, didn't clean out my locker, just left the keys on the counter and drove until my tank ran dry. I rented a motel room 2 towns over, still smelling like smoke and damp moss, and I didn't sleep the entire first night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shack again. Not just in my memory, in detail, like I was still inside it. The groaning wood, the cold ring of ash, that hat. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, just stress, right? Mental fatigue. The mind plays tricks on you when you're isolated for too long. That's what they always say. I almost believed it until my second night in that motel. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to find the door unlocked. Not just unlocked, wide open, swinging gently in the breeze like someone had just walked through it. I hadn't opened it. I triple-checked it before bed. There were no cars in the lot outside, no guests on my floor, no sounds except for a distant creak like metal scraping pavement or dragging something heavy. I grabbed the desk lamp and stepped to the doorway, heart hammering in my throat. Nothing there. But when I looked down, I saw it on the threshold. A pine needle. One. Just lying there in the middle of the rug. I hadn't been near a tree in over 48 hours. That morning, I left the motel, found a Starbucks, and tried to use their Wi-Fi to search anything I could about Sector 9. Ranger Howell. Missing persons. Local disappearances. I expected nothing. Instead, I found a thread buried in an old forum from 2008. One of those weird survivalist boards that looks like it hasn't been updated in years. The post was titled, "Anyone hiked S9? Found Bone Circle plus boot?" There were no replies. Just a single user named Backtrail Reaper saying he found a boot with a foot in it while mapping old ranger stations. He mentioned hearing someone call his name in his voice. Said he saw figures at the edge of campfires, that they never came close. Just watched. Then nothing. No follow-ups. The account hadn't posted since. I clicked on his profile. Only one image ever uploaded. It was low quality, grainy, black and white. A photo of the shack. And through the broken window, a man. Just a silhouette, wearing a ranger's hat. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking so bad I spilled my coffee all over the table. I left it, rushed outside, tried to get air. But the moment I stepped into the parking lot, I stopped cold. My car, there were pine needles scattered across the hood, laid out like they'd been arranged. 6 of them, pointing toward the woods across the highway. No wind, no storm, just a perfect row of needles, all pointing in the same direction, like a trail. I drove straight to the next town, changed my name, got a job at a gas station, kept my head down. I figured whatever followed me, whatever Howell was, maybe it would fade. Maybe if I ignored it, it would get bored and find someone else. That worked for a while. A few months passed. I didn't see or hear anything. No whispers, no knocks, nothing in my dreams. Then about 6 weeks ago, someone left a package on my porch. No return address. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook and a ranger's patch. The notebook had my name on the front. The first page read, "The woods remember. You left something behind." And underneath that, in tiny letters, almost invisible unless you tilted the page, "You opened the drawer. That means you're next." I didn't open the notebook for days. I kept it shut, tucked it under a pile of old clothes in my closet, like a cursed object from a movie. But it was real. Too real. I could feel it when I was near it, like heat radiating from a stove burner that wasn't even turned on. And the worst part? That damn ranger patch. It wasn't new. It was worn, dirt-stained, frayed around the edges. The stitching was nearly gone. It was Howell's. I knew it. I didn't need proof. The night after the package arrived, I started hearing the noises again. Not in the woods this time. In my walls, my attic, the crawl space beneath the floorboards, scraping, dragging, breathing. And then the smell. Anyone who spent time in the backcountry knows it. That thick, coppery stench of wet fur, rot old blood. The kind of smell that tells your body something died nearby. I checked every vent, every crawl space. Found nothing until I got to the basement. There, pinned to the wooden support beam near the water heater, was a single pine needle jammed in like a nail, held in place by something I didn't want to touch. Something dark and sticky that had dried into the wood. I ripped it down and locked the basement behind me. But I knew. I knew the message was clear. You can leave the forest, but it doesn't leave you. I finally opened the notebook. Inside, it was written in the same sharp handwriting as Howell's logs. Same odd phrasing, same strange spacing. It started with my name. Redacted entered the boundary at 7:48 TARS. Stayed overnight, saw the shack, heard the call, felt the weight. Good. He's learning. He will be the next. I flipped through the pages in a panic. The entries weren't past events. They were predictions, written like a future log. He'll deny it first, hide, try to live like the rest of them, but it will call again. And when he returns, he'll see the others. The ones who stayed, the ones who didn't speak, who watch, who whisper. He'll walk the perimeter 3 times, he'll find the second shack, and beneath it, the pit. There were dozens of entries, all describing me, my actions, my reactions, conversations I hadn't had yet, places I hadn't seen. And then, at the bottom of one page in heavy ink, he will write this down. Exactly like this, he will share it. And still, no one will believe him. I slammed the notebook shut and threw it in the garbage behind the gas station where I worked. Burned the patch with a lighter in the sink. The flame turned green for half a second. I swear to God. The next morning, the notebook was back on my nightstand. No smell, no signs of entry. Just sitting there, waiting. I started seeing people at the edge of things, at the grocery store, in the reflection of windows, just beyond streetlights at night. Tall, still shapes, some of them wearing hats. They never approached. They didn't need to. I knew what they were. Rangers who never left. Campers who wandered off trail. Hikers who followed the sound of their own voice and found something else on the other end. I've been marked, tagged like wildlife, like I'm being monitored, studied. And 2 days ago, someone sent me an email from a dummy address. No subject line, no text in the body, just one attachment. A trail cam photo. Low res, black and white. It showed a clearing in the woods, fog hanging low, and a figure tall, broad-shouldered, standing in the middle, wearing a ranger uniform, holding something in his hand. I zoomed in, and my throat closed up. He was holding the notebook, and behind him, in the tree line, there were dozens of eyes watching. I'm not sure how much time I have left. Not because I think someone's coming for me. No, they've already been here. I just don't know when they'll stop watching and start moving. When they'll decide it's time to finish what was started in that forgotten piece of forest. It's happening again. Last night I woke up in the middle of the floor. Not my bed, not the couch, just the hardwood, lying flat, face up, eyes open. And my boots were on. I don't remember putting them on. The soles were dirty, mud-caked, pine needles stuck to the laces. I checked the locks, the windows, the basement, all sealed. But the air, it smelled like rain and moss and ash, the same way it smelled inside that shack in Sector 9. I checked my phone's GPS history. There was a 4-hour gap between midnight and 4 a.m. The location pin was just a blank patch of forest, unmarked, west of where I used to work. No trails, no road access, a dead zone. I think I went back. I think they called me, and I answered. I'm not writing this for sympathy. I'm not asking anyone to believe me. I'm writing this because someone will find it eventually. Maybe you already have. Maybe you're a new ranger. Maybe you're just a hiker who saw something strange, a cabin where there shouldn't be one, a voice calling your name that sounds a little too much like you. This story ends soon. Not just for me, maybe for you too. I've been seeing a new figure lately. Not in the woods, in the mirror. Sometimes, when I walk past, I catch him standing differently, wearing the old uniform, hat pulled low, dirt on his cheeks, a little smile like he's been waiting for this moment a long, long time. And this morning, the notebook was open on my kitchen table. I didn't leave it there. I swear I didn't. There was a fresh page, handwritten, my own handwriting. I finally understand. I've always belonged to the woods. I just forgot. But they didn't. I'll go back tonight. I know the way now. If you're reading this, don't come looking. Don't try to find Sector 9. They won't let you leave. Not really. Not forever. They let me leave once so I could bring someone back. Now it's your turn. I caught a man in a park ranger uniform who wasn't one of us. I've worked as a ranger in Olympic National Park for almost 8 years now. That place is beautiful in the kind of way that makes you forget how dangerous it can be. Towering evergreens, fog-thick valleys, rivers that sound like whispering voices if you're alone too long. It's the kind of terrain that feels ancient, like it's watching you more than you're watching it. Most of my job is boring stuff. Trail checks, radioing hikers who stayed out too late, dragging dumbasses out of restricted areas. But every once in a while, you get a call that doesn't sit right, the kind where your gut clenches before the radio even goes quiet. This started about a month ago, early spring. The trails were still slushy with snowmelt, which meant fewer crowds. I was posted at the Hoh Rainforest Outpost, pretty remote. No cell reception, just a Data-Daki Ranger radio and the occasional flyover from search and rescue. I'd been on evening patrol heading toward the Blue Glacier Spur when I spotted someone ahead of me on the trail. He had the uniform, brown slacks, green jacket, wide-brimmed hat. From the back, everything looked legit, but the way he was standing, arms stiff at his sides, head tilted like he was listening too hard to something I couldn't hear. I called out, "Hey, you from the Fork Station." I figured maybe they sent someone to assist with some storm damage we'd had earlier in the week. The guy didn't move, didn't even flinch. I walked closer, trying not to sound weird about it. "You good, man?" When I was maybe 20 feet away, he turned. I don't know how else to say it. Something was off about his face. Not wrong in an obvious way. He looked normal. Except, it was too normal, like someone trying to copy what a person should look like. His eyes didn't track right. He blinked too slow, like he was trying to remember when to do it. And his uniform, it looked about right, but the patches were sewn in the wrong places. Name tag was missing. His badge was plastic, not even the right font. I felt my stomach tighten. "You got ID?" I asked, keeping my tone calm but assertive. He stared at me, then smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't touch the eyes. His lips moved like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. I instinctively reached for my radio. "This is Unit 11 at trail marker 22 near Glacier Point. I've got an unidentified individual in what looks like ranger gear. No ID. Unresponsive. Requesting backup or verification on visiting staff." There was a pause. Then the reply came, crackling through. "Copy that, Unit 11. There's no visiting personnel assigned to your sector today. Confirm again. Over." I looked up. The guy was gone. Just vanished. Like I blinked and he stepped behind a tree. Only there were no trees close enough to hide behind. The nearest thicket was across the trail, at least 15 feet away. And there was no sound, no crunch of leaves, no branches snapping, no breathing. I stood there, heart thudding in my ears, scanning every inch of the trail. The sun was almost gone by then, and the shadows were starting to get thick. I didn't see him again that night, but I didn't sleep much either. Every creak of the cabin floorboards, every gust of wind scraping the side of the outpost had me reaching for the rifle locked under my cot. The worst part? When I checked the log the next morning, someone had opened the supply shed, but it was still locked. From the inside. I told myself the lock thing was just a mistake. Maybe I'd left it ajar the night before, and the wind blew it open. Maybe someone else came by, someone with a key. I even asked around during the next radio check-in. Fork said no one had been sent out. Port Angeles said the same. Still, I filed an incident report just in case. The following few days were quiet. Cold mornings, foggy afternoons, standard maintenance patrols. But I kept thinking about that guy, the silent ranger, the fake badge, the plastic grin. I kept replaying that moment where he just wasn't there anymore. No noise, no movement. Like he had blinked out of existence. Then hikers started coming in with odd reports. A group of college kids from Spokane stopped by the station 2 days after my sighting. They were rattled. Nothing extreme, but definitely spooked. Said they'd seen a man standing in the tree line near the waterfall trail. Just standing, not moving. When they waved at him, he turned around and walked into the forest. No trail or anything, just disappeared between the trees. One of them, a girl in a puffy North Face jacket, said it felt like he wanted them to follow, like he was leading them somewhere. But something about him felt fake. Like it was a trick. That word hit me hard. I asked what he looked like. Same uniform, same wide-brimmed hat. Said he didn't speak, just stood there with this weird frozen expression, like he was waiting for something. After they left, I decided to hike that trail again myself. There's a spot along that path, not even a real marker, just a subtle shift in the dirt, like the trail splits for a few feet before merging back. Nobody ever takes the fork. It's a runoff route meant to divert rainwater in storms, not for hikers. But when I got to it, I stopped. There were footprints in the mud. Boot prints. Big ones. I crouched down to look. They matched our issue boots. Same tread, same shape, But the stride was weird. Too long, like the person had been walking stiff-legged or dragging one foot behind. I followed them maybe 30 yards off the path. The deeper I went, the quieter everything got. The kind of silence that makes your eardrums ring. Then I found the fire pit. It wasn't like a hiker's. No rocks, no structure. Just scorched earth and half-burnt wood. Around it were bones, small ones, maybe rabbit or raccoon, but they were arranged in a circle, neatly placed, like some weird art project. In the center, blackened by soot, was a ranger hat, identical to mine. I radioed it in. Dispatch asked if I wanted backup. I said yes. An hour later, I was still waiting. That's when I heard someone whistling. No clear tune, just 3 rising notes, soft and slow, like a lullaby you only half remember from childhood. I spun around, rifle half raised. The whistling stopped. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. Just as I started backing away, I saw something sticking out of the underbrush. A scrap of cloth. I tugged it free. It was part of a ranger's shirt, torn, faded, caked in dried mud, and something darker. The patch said M. Gilroy. I didn't recognize the name, but the uniform was ours. All right, stitching, font, everything correct, except that shirt wasn't from the current uniform design. It was discontinued 4 years ago. I took it with me. Back at the station, I searched the employee records. No Gilroy, past or present. I even asked the older rangers during the next supply drop. Nobody had heard of him. One guy, Charlie, got real quiet when he saw the shirt. Said it looked too familiar. "Where'd you find that?" he asked. I told him. He just nodded once, then said, "Keep your doors locked at night, even the shed." That night, I deadbolted everything. I double-checked the shed padlock and put a chair under the doorknob of the cabin. Then I went to bed with the rifle across my chest. Around 3 a.m., something woke me up. Not a sound, a smell. It was faint but unmistakable, the acrid reek of burnt fabric and wet ash. I sat up slowly, my skin cold and tight. And there, at the edge of the window, was the silhouette of a man, wide-brimmed hat, shoulders too straight, unmoving. Watching me sleep. By the time I threw the door open, he was gone. But he'd left footprints on the inside of the window ledge. And the muddy ranger hat I'd taken from the fire pit? It was now sitting on my bed, dry, clean, and still warm. I didn't sleep for more than 10 minutes at a time. After that night, every creak of the floorboards felt deliberate. Every gust of wind scraping the side of the cabin sounded like someone dragging their fingers across wood, slow and patient. The next morning, I grabbed the hat, still resting exactly where I left it on the edge of the mattress, and shoved it into a plastic evidence bag. It still smelled like charred pine and sweat, even though it looked clean. I drove it down to the Forks Ranger Station. I didn't trust our outpost anymore. Told the supervisor, Rob Halgren, what had happened. Not everything. Not the footprints inside the window, not the frozen face I'd seen on the trail. Just the stuff I could back up. The old uniform, the fire pit, the unlogged person in full gear. He brushed it off as a local squatter, or maybe a disgruntled former employee. Said folks sometimes steal uniforms to get into restricted areas, spook tourists, or sell park gear on eBay. Told me to file a report with the Park Service and let the system work. But Rob didn't look me in the eyes while he said it. And as I was heading out the door, he muttered something. Soft, like he wasn't meant to say it aloud. Should have stayed buried. I stopped. What? He just shook his head and waved me off like he was tired. Nothing. Just watch your back. Okay, I took the long route back to my outpost that afternoon. Didn't want to be near the cabin before sunset. Figured I'd do a final sweep of the Southern Trail Loop, the one that curved toward the backcountry basin we call Devil's Throat. Locals avoid it. Old logging stories. Mostly missing workers, strange accidents, that kind of thing. About 2 miles in, I saw another set of footprints. Same tread, same long, awkward stride. They were recent, too, pressed into the mossy trail like the person had come through not more than an hour before me. But there was something else that chilled me. The prints doubled back on themselves. Whoever it was had walked in a wide circle multiple times, like they were pacing, or waiting. I followed them off the trail. About 100 yards in, the trees opened into a clearing I didn't recognize. Not on the map. Not on any terrain charts I'd ever seen. It was wrong. That's the best way I can say it. The space felt too quiet, too open, the way snow mutes sound after a storm, even though the air was dry. A boulder sat in the middle, black as obsidian. Fresh gouges clawed across it, like someone had taken a knife to the stone. And right there, leaning against the boulder, was another ranger shirt. This one was soaked in something. Not mud, not entirely blood either. It was thicker, darker, like oil with a copper tint. And next to it, a name badge. Metal, polished. M. Gilroy. Again, exactly the same as the one I found earlier. Only this time the badge was brand new. No scratches, no rust, like it had been printed yesterday. I started backing up slowly, and then I heard it. That whistling again. Same 3 notes. Soft, slow, but closer this time. Too close. I turned and caught just a glimpse of something moving behind a tree. Just enough to see that damn uniform. That wide-brimmed hat. His back was to me again, just like before. Rigid, still, arms tight against his sides. Then he stepped sideways without turning and disappeared behind a tree he couldn't have fit behind. I froze. He hadn't walked. He hadn't even shifted. It was like someone dragging a cutout across a piece of paper. Smooth, soundless. The radio on my belt cracked to life. Unit 11, you there? We just got a distress ping off your GPS. You good? I fumbled for it. Dispatch, I need backup now. I'm near marker 42, just past Devil's Throat. I found clothing from an unconfirmed ranger ID. Possible impersonator. Extremely dangerous. He's stalking the trails. Repeat, this guy is not one of us. There was silence. Then static. Then, return to the station, Unit 11. Do not pursue. Do not engage. Lock everything. Await instruction. The voice didn't sound like dispatch. Too flat. No call sign. No repeat back. Just that one cold message. And then I heard the click. Not from the radio, from behind me. I turned around. There was a camera nailed into the tree nearest to me. One of ours. Trail cam. Motion triggered, but it wasn't pointed at wildlife paths. It was angled down at me. The lens was still moving, still adjusting. Someone had just remotely accessed it. There weren't supposed to be any cameras this far out. I yanked the battery pack out and crushed the SD card under my boot. I didn't even think. Just reacted. Then I ran. Not jogged. Ran. All the way back to my outpost, lungs burning, legs cramping, ears straining for footsteps that never came. When I got back, I slammed the door shut and locked every bolt. That was when I saw it. The muddy ranger hat. It was back on my bed. This time it was wet, dripping, and carved into the brim like with a blade were the words, "Gilroy lives here now." I didn't move for hours. I sat there on the edge of the cot with my back against the wall, rifle on my lap, and just watched the hat. Watched it drip, a slow, rhythmic plink, plink, plink onto the plywood floor. The water was dark, stained with something thick and red, like someone had steeped rust in a bucket for a week. I didn't dare touch it again. By sunrise, I was shaking. It was the kind of cold that gets into your bones. But I knew it wasn't the temperature. I was still soaked in sweat, shirt clinging to my back, teeth clenched so tight my jaw ached. I called in sick that morning, said I wasn't feeling right. Might have caught something. They said, fine, rest up. But no one offered to swing by. No one asked questions. That afternoon, I packed up a bag and drove down to Port Angeles to crash at a cheap roadside motel. Place was called the Whispering Cedars. One of those no-frills joints with flickering neon and curtains that don't quite close all the way. I needed noise, cars, civilization, something with walls that weren't made of pine. I didn't sleep much there either, because that night, someone slid something under my motel room door. I almost didn't notice it. I'd left the TV on, one of those late-night History Channel marathons where everything turns into an alien conspiracy. When I finally clicked it off, I saw the edge of an envelope sticking out on the carpet. No return address, no markings, just a single Polaroid inside, but not of me. It was a photo of the inside of my ranger cabin, taken from my bedroom door. My rifle was on the bed. My boots were at the foot of it. You could see the logbook I'd left open on the desk. The timestamp on the bottom corner was from the previous night, meaning someone had been inside while I slept just feet away. My legs gave out. I hit the floor, hands shaking so hard I almost tore the picture in half. I wanted to drive straight to the police, but what was I going to say? That someone broke into a government cabin and left me a photograph in a motel 50 miles away? I checked out before sunrise and drove back to the park. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to prove to myself it wasn't real, that the photo was old, that it was some kind of sick prank. I didn't care. When I opened the cabin door, I almost vomited. Everything was exactly as it had looked in the photo. Rifle on the bed. Logbook open to the same page. But now there were footprints. Muddy, coming in through the door, looping around the room, stopping right beside where I should have been sleeping. I followed them with my eyes. They didn't leave the way they came in. They led to the closet. My hand hovered over the knob. I didn't want to open it. Every part of me screamed to burn the whole place down and run. But I opened it anyway. Empty, except for a second Ranger uniform hanging neatly on a wire hanger. No dust, no fold lines. It had been placed there recently. And on the shelf above it, there was something carved into the wood. Not a word this time. Just a symbol. 3 sharp lines pointing down like crooked teeth. And underneath it, the number, Sochstart 1973. I don't know why that hit me so hard, but it felt significant. Like a clue I couldn't read yet. I took a photo of it with my phone. First time I'd used the damn thing in days. That night, I made a decision. I needed answers. I remembered Charlie, the older ranger, the one who'd recognized Gilroy's name. He'd been around forever, long before most of us. Quiet guy, paranoid, but sharp. Lived up north near Sekiu in this little trailer with solar panels and no Wi-Fi. Total off-grid hermit. I drove up the next day. When I pulled into his gravel driveway, he was already standing outside, arms crossed. He looked like he hadn't slept. I was wondering how long it would take you to show up, he said, deadpan. I didn't say anything, just held up the picture of the carving, the 3 lines, the number. Charlie's face went pale. He didn't invite me inside. He just walked around back, grabbed a rusted metal tin from under a loose board on the porch, and handed it to me. Inside were old newspaper clippings, some yellowed, others water damaged, all about Olympic Park, and they all had one thing in common: Rangers missing, always alone. One headline read, "Local Ranger disappears without a trace. Last known location, Devil's Throat. Date, 1973. There was a photo, black and white, blurry. The man in the shot was standing in front of a fire pit. Same posture, same stiff stance, same wide-brimmed hat. Under the photo, in small type, Ranger Martin Gilroy. Charlie lit a cigarette with shaking fingers and said, he was never found. Search went on for weeks. No prints, no gear, just his name badge nailed to a tree. I asked him how he knew all this. He looked at me, dead serious. Because I saw him last month. Same place you did. He hasn't aged a day. He exhaled and said 5 words I'll never forget. Gilroy doesn't live alone anymore. Charlie wouldn't say more after that. I tried asking questions. What happened to Gilroy? What does the symbol mean? Who else knows? But he just stared off into the woods behind his trailer. Cigarette burned down to the filter, lips tight. It was like something in him had already decided I was too far gone to help. Before I left, he pressed an old laminated map into my hands. It was brittle at the corners, smelled like mildew and sweat, and had faded red markings drawn all across it. Circles, X's, dates. Some went back decades. Stay away from the places marked with the symbol, he muttered. If you see a second set of your own footprints, turn around. Don't follow the calls. Don't answer if it says your name. I asked what he meant by it. Charlie went back inside without a word. I drove off and pulled over a few miles down the road to study the map. Most of the marks were deep in the backcountry along trails that had since been shut down or renamed. But one of them, one of the red X's, was less than a mile from my station. Gravedigger's Hollow. I'd been there just once. No real trail, just a collapsed mine shaft from the turn of the century, tucked into a ridge of moss-covered stone, supposedly sealed after a rockfall. Nothing but stories and old warnings. But I couldn't stop thinking about the photo from 1973. Gilroy standing near the fire pit, just like I'd seen him, just like he'd been standing when he watched me sleep. I waited until dusk before heading out. I didn't tell anyone. I packed the map, a flashlight, a sidearm, and a flare gun. Left a note taped to my bunk, just in case. If I'm not back by sunrise, don't look for me. Call state troopers and send them to Gravedigger's Hollow. The trail was overgrown, brush thick as a wall, trees hanging low like they were trying to hold me back. By the time I reached the ridge, it was almost full dark. My breath fogged in front of me. The air stank of mildew and something else, like burnt copper and wet fur. The mine shaft was still there, but it wasn't sealed anymore. The boards had been torn out, not rotted, ripped. Splinters splayed outward like claws had pried them loose. And in the dirt just outside the entrance, I found boot prints. 2 sets, one fresh, one older, but identical tread. Both were mine. I told myself it was a trick of the light. That maybe someone else wore the same boots. That maybe the ground had shifted. But then I heard it, that damn whistling. 3 notes, rising, slow. But this time, it was inside the shaft. I raised the flashlight and stepped forward. Just inside the mouth, someone had painted on the wall in black ash and soot the symbol, the 3 crooked lines pointing down. Below it, scratched in with something sharp, were the words, "You were supposed to forget." My light flickered. Not the battery dying, this was something else, like the shadows were interfering with it. Then, just ahead, maybe 15 feet in, I saw him, Gilroy, standing in the tunnel, unmoving, hat low over his face. His ranger shirt was torn open, pale skin visible underneath like bark peeled off a tree. His arms were stiff, fingers bloated. But it was the smell that hit me hardest. Rot. Years old, the kind of smell that lives in your nose for days. I aimed my sidearm at him. "Don't move." He didn't. I stepped closer, my light shaking in my grip. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. I was almost within arm's reach when I realized he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me. I spun around. There was another ranger behind me. Same uniform, same stance. No face, just blank skin where the eyes and mouth should be, stretched taut like wet paper. Its chest heaved once, and the sound it made was not a breath. It was a laugh, low, broken, like air pushed through shredded lungs. I fired the sidearm twice. The thing didn't flinch. I turned and sprinted out of the shaft, crashing through branches, rocks tearing into my shins. I didn't stop until I saw the glow of my cabin lights in the distance, every muscle in my body screaming. When I finally collapsed inside, I slammed the door shut and dropped to the floor. That was 2 days ago. Since then, the radios haven't worked. The generator cuts out at night. My phone battery is dead and won't recharge. Even the solar pack won't hold a charge. And last night I woke up to breathing. Not mine. Slow. Wet. Clothes. Coming from under my bed. When I finally got the guts to look, nothing was there. But carved into the wooden slats beneath my mattress were 3 words, jagged and deep. "You're next, Ranger." I haven't left the cabin in over 30 hours. I don't know what time it is anymore. My watch stopped at 3:17 a.m. and hasn't ticked since. Every window is covered, every door locked, though I don't know why I bother. Whatever this is, locks don't seem to matter. The last time I looked outside, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was a hiker. Maybe help, finally. But then I saw the uniform. That same goddamn ranger outfit. It looked just like mine, except older, faded, as if time had worn through it, until only the idea of the uniform remained. He was standing at the tree line, motionless. Then another one appeared beside him. And another. 3 of them, all identical, all still. None of them moved. None of them came closer. They just watched. I tried the radio again. Static. I tried the flare gun, fired it into the sky like a last desperate scream. Nothing. That night, they got closer. I didn't hear them, didn't see them move. But when I woke up, muddy footprints circled the outside of the cabin. More than 3 now, dozens. Some small, some too large to be human. But all boot prints, all from Ranger-issue gear. The door had scratches on it, deep, uneven. Like someone had dragged a nail or a key across the wood over and over. Not trying to get in, just reminding me they could. There's a pattern to them. I can see it now. 3 long lines, down over and over again. Again and again. That symbol. I thought I was losing my mind until I checked the old employee ledger. the one we keep in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the one nobody ever looks at. Names, dates, assignments. In 1973, 4 Rangers were listed for patrol in this section of Olympic: Martin Gilroy, Harlan Brooks, Samuel Dawes, and a 4th name that's been blacked out, literally scratched from the paper. But something's faint behind it. I rubbed it with a pencil, shaded the spot like you do with an old gravestone. The outline of my name. Mine. The year was wrong, though. It didn't say 2025. It said 1973. I don't know what this place is. A loop. A trap. Something left behind. Older than the park. Older than people. Maybe we were never meant to be here. Maybe that's why they put rangers out here in the first place. Not to protect the park from people, but to protect people from what's underneath it. I'm writing this on the backs of old trail maps, pages torn from the ranger manual. Anything I can leave behind, because I hear them now. Inside. Not footsteps. Breathing. Low. Close. All around. They've finally come in. I saw the door creak open. Not forced, just invited. Like the cabin itself was tired of holding them back. The last thing I saw before the lights went out was my reflection in the window. But it wasn't me. It was Gilroy. Smiling. Wearing my badge. If you find this, don't come looking. Don't answer if they call your name. And whatever you do, don't put on the hat. The moment our tires crunched on the gravel driveway of that rental near Mount Rainier, I knew this trip was going to be something else. I've always had a knack for sensing when things are about to turn sideways. Maybe it's the Montana in me, or maybe it's just because I've read too many creepy novels. Either way, as I looked out at the dense Washington forest that surrounded us, I felt an itch at the back of my mind. My friends were a mix of excitement and exhaustion as we unloaded our bags. Alex, the planner of our group, had found this place. "Guys, this is going to be epic," he said with a grin that was too wide to be just about the scenery. Sarah, the skeptic, rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her curiosity. And then there was Mark, always ready for anything, camera in hand. We were greeted by Michelle, our rental host, who had the rugged, weathered look of someone who'd spent her life outdoors. She was across the street tending to a horse in a pasture that seemed to stretch into infinity. "Welcome," she called out, her voice carrying a hint of something I couldn't quite place. Intrigue, maybe. We all walked over to greet her, eager to stretch our legs and get to know the place. Michelle had a way about her that was both disarming and slightly unnerving. She offered to show us around her property, and we eagerly agreed. The place was more than just a house. It was a slice of untouched wilderness, complete with more horses and a smattering of other animals. But it was when we crossed over to her backyard, past her quaint wooden house, that things started to get interesting. Michelle gathered us in a circle, her eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and excitement. "So, do you guys want to go back home with a story?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. How could we say no? We followed her past a barn, walking into a part of her backyard that was more forest than garden. The ground was soft underfoot, the air thick with the scent of pine and earth. About 100 feet in, Michelle stopped. "Stop. Look down," she instructed. At our feet was a footprint, but not just any footprint. It was massive, easily twice the size of my own, and oddly shaped, wider and longer than any humans could be. And there were toe imprints, clear as day. "This," Michelle said, a serious tone replacing her earlier playfulness, "was made by a Sasquatch." A Sasquatch. The word hung in the air like a challenge. I glanced at my friends and saw their expressions mirror my own, a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Michelle went on to tell us how she found the imprint, and then, almost as an afterthought, how she had come to own this land and the property across the street where we were staying. Her voice took on a somber note. "You might think I'm crazy, but if I knew about their existence, I would have never moved here. Do you want to see more?" There was a collective pause, a moment where we all considered the sanity of following this path. But adventure has a way of tipping the scales. We nodded, and Michelle led us deeper into the woods. As we walked, the forest seemed to close in around us. The chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves were the only sounds that accompanied our footsteps. I felt a shiver run down my spine, the kind you get when you realize you're part of a story much bigger than yourself. And as the shadows lengthened around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. We ventured further into the dense Washington woods. I felt an uneasiness creep up my spine. I've been in plenty of wild places, but there was something about these woods, shrouded in twilight, that felt different. The trees loomed over us like silent giants, their branches casting long, strange shadows that danced in the breeze. Michelle led us with a confidence that only comes from someone who knows every inch of their land. She was part guide, part storyteller, weaving a narrative that was as captivating as it was unsettling. We were deep in her territory now, far from the comforts of the rental. "Here," Michelle said, stopping suddenly. She pointed at the ground to a cluster of sticks. They were arranged in a way that was too deliberate to be the work of nature. "I laid these out earlier today. Look how they've been moved." We circled around the sticks, the air thick with intrigue. The arrangement was peculiar, like a cryptic message left by an unknown hand. Michelle's theory was that the Sasquatch were mischievous creatures, fond of small pranks like this. It was hard to digest, but out here in the embrace of the wilderness, anything seemed possible. As we walked on, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The forest had a presence, a personality almost. It was as if the trees themselves were alive with secrets, whispering tales of the unknown. Michelle's next words sent a chill down my spine. "Right about here is where you might feel something unusual," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And she was right. The air around us felt charged, electric. The hair on my arms stood on end. And I wasn't the only one. Alex looked around nervously, and even Sarah, our group skeptic, seemed uneasy. "They asked me to bring you here," Michelle continued, her voice taking on a solemn tone. "The Sasquatch, I mean. They wanted to say hello." I tried to process her words. Were we really being summoned by a legendary creature, or was this all an elaborate ruse? But before I could ponder further, Michelle posed a question that cut through the silence like a knife. "Has any of you recently lost a brother, or experienced psychic abilities?" We exchanged glances, each of us shaking our heads. The question hung in the air, adding to the thickening plot of our little adventure. Our journey took us to the last point of our walk. Michelle's eyes widened as she examined another set of sticks. "I can't believe it," she murmured. Earlier, she had laid them out, and now they were rearranged, just like the first set. She spoke of how she often left gifts for the Sasquatch, food mostly, and how they always disappeared. I was skeptical, to say the least. I've spent enough time in the wild to know that plenty of creatures could be responsible for missing food. But there was something in Michelle's conviction that made me question my doubts. Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, we heard it. A sound that defied description. It was distant but clear, a bizarre chorus of hoots and laughs unlike anything I've ever heard. Michelle's face lit up. "That's them," she said with certainty. "The Sasquatch." We stood there in the heart of the forest, listening to the haunting melody of the wild. It was a moment suspended in time, a crossroads between the known and the unknown. As we made our way back to the cabin, the forest seemed to whisper its secrets, leaving us with more questions than answers. Back at the rental, the night had wrapped itself around the cabin like a dark, enigmatic blanket. We sat on the porch, nursing our drinks, each lost in thought. The conversation swirled around our bizarre encounter, theories tossed back and forth like a game of catch. Alex was all in, buying every word Michelle had said. Sarah remained skeptical, her brows knitted in doubt. And Mark, well, he seemed more interested in capturing the perfect night shot of the woods than joining our debate. The thing about the wilderness is, it has a way of stripping down your beliefs, leaving you raw and open to possibilities you'd scoff at in the light of day. And right then, under the vast starry sky, I felt that vulnerability. "I'm going back out there," declared Alex suddenly, his voice cutting through the night. "I have to see this for myself." Mark, ever the adventurer, didn't hesitate to join him. I watched them disappear into the tree line, their flashlights bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps in the darkness. Left alone, I felt a strange sense of solitude. I wasn't up for chasing shadows in the woods. Instead, I rolled a joint and settled into the quiet, letting the serene beauty of the Washington wilderness wash over me. The cabin, with its warm lights and rustic charm, felt like a sanctuary. But the stillness of the night was deceptive. As I sat there, lost in the tranquility, it happened again. That sound, distant but unmistakable. The eerie, almost otherworldly call that Michelle had attributed to the Sasquatch. It started as an owl's hoot, morphing into that bizarre monkey-like laughter. I froze, every instinct screaming that this wasn't just some nocturnal animal. There was an intelligence in that sound, a deliberate communication that transcended the barriers of the known world. I wanted to dismiss it, to rationalize it as the trickery of the night. But sitting there alone in the vastness of the wilderness, I couldn't. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly, the sound echoing in my mind long after it had faded away. When Alex and Mark finally returned, I relayed my experience, but they hadn't heard anything. Their skepticism was evident, and I couldn't blame them. If I hadn't heard it with my own ears, I might have been skeptical too. The night wore on, and eventually we retreated to the warmth of the cabin. But sleep was elusive. I lay in bed, my mind racing with questions. What were those sounds? Was Michelle playing an elaborate prank, or was there something more to her stories? Driven by a restless curiosity, I grabbed my phone and did what any modern-day seeker of truth would do. I Googled, Washington State creepy laugh animal. The first result was an article titled, Bigfoot or Animals? Hair-raising sounds coming from a swamp on Indian reservation in Oregon. My heart skipped a beat. The description matched what I had heard perfectly. As I lay there staring into the darkness, I realized that the wilderness holds more mysteries than we can fathom. And sometimes the line between legend and reality is thinner than we dare to believe. Morning in the Washington wilderness is like waking up in a different world. The light filters through the trees in a soft golden haze, painting everything in a hue of tranquility. But that morning, as I sat on the porch with a steaming cup of coffee, the beauty of the surroundings was overshadowed by the lingering questions from the previous night. The article I had found about the Bigfoot sounds in Oregon was still open on my phone. I reread it, searching for some clue, some rational explanation. But the words just danced around the possibility of the unknown, offering no concrete answers. Alex and Mark were the first to join me, their steps heavy with the lack of any real discovery from their nocturnal expedition. Sarah followed, her skepticism now mixed with a tinge of curiosity. We sat there in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The conversation from last night resumed, but with a different tone. Now, there was a sense of wonder, a willingness to entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, there was more to Michelle's stories than we had initially believed. It was time to leave the cabin, to say goodbye to the mystery that had enveloped us for the past couple of days. We packed our things, the mood subdued. The encounter with the unknown had touched each of us in different ways, leaving a mark that wouldn't easily fade. As we loaded the car, Michelle appeared. Her demeanor was the same as when we first met her, a mix of the earthly and the ethereal. "I hope you found what you were looking for," she said, her eyes twinkling with unspoken knowledge. We exchanged farewells, but her words stayed with me. Had we found what we were looking for, or had we stumbled upon a mystery that was never meant to be solved? The drive back was quiet, each mile taking us further away from the enigmatic woods and back to our reality. But the wilderness has a way of staying with you, its mystery seeping into your soul. In the days that followed, I found myself diving deeper into the lore of the Sasquatch, reading accounts, watching documentaries. The skeptic in me battled with the part that had heard those unexplainable sounds in the dark. The rational part of my brain argued for logic, but the primal part, the part that had sat alone on that porch, knew that some things defy explanation. I realized then that the wilderness is more than just trees and wildlife. It's a living, breathing entity filled with secrets and stories that go back centuries. And sometimes it chooses to reveal a glimpse of its mysteries, not to provide answers, but to remind us that there are things in this world beyond our understanding. As I sat at my desk, the city noises a stark contrast to the serene silence of the woods. I knew the experience would stay with me. The line between legend and reality might be blurred, but sometimes the mystery is more important than the truth. In the end, our Sasquatch experience in Washington state was a journey into the unknown, a reminder of the vast and unexplored mysteries that lie hidden in the heart of the wilderness. This trail has been closed since 1986. I found out why. I've been a park ranger for almost 5 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Drunken campers, lost hikers, black bears pawing through dumpsters, even the occasional cryptic scratch mark on tree trunks that someone swore was from a mountain lion, despite the fact that we haven't had those around here in decades. But last month, I found something that's been gnawing at my brain ever since. It was late October, just before the snow really starts coming down in the northern Rockies. I was pulling solo duty at Pine Haven National Park, a massive stretch of wilderness in Montana that doesn't get nearly as many visitors as places like Glacier or Yellowstone. It's quieter, less polished, and honestly, it's my favorite post. That night, I was supposed to patrol the Eastern Ridge trails, make sure no idiots were sneaking into camp without permits. We'd had issues before, college kids from Missoula thinking they're invincible, ignoring the warnings about early snow, or worse, the missing persons reports that still trickled in every couple of years. I was finishing up my thermos of gas station coffee, sitting in the cracked leather seat of the Ranger truck, when the radio crackled. Unit 4, you copy. I grabbed the mic. Yeah, this is 4. Hey, got a report of a light on the Elk Ridge Trail. Thought you should check it out before you clock out. Probably nothing. My stomach sank. Elk Ridge had been officially closed since 1986 after a rockslide wiped out a good chunk of the switchbacks. The park never reopened it. Too unstable, they said. But every now and then, you'd hear stories. Strange figures spotted near the trailhead, weird noises coming from that part of the park at night. Hikers who got turned around and ended up back there and didn't come out. Copy that, I said, trying to sound casual, though I felt my fingers tense up on the steering wheel. I headed east, bumping along the dirt road, pine trees crowding in on both sides. The further I drove, the more isolated it felt, the kind of isolation that makes your skin crawl. I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror every so often, half expecting to see headlights behind me, though I knew no one else should be out here. When I reached the Elk Ridge trailhead, I killed the engine and stepped out. The wind cut through my uniform, sharp and cold, and I pulled my jacket tighter. The place was choked with overgrowth, thorny brush curling over what was once a well-maintained path, wooden signs, long rotted and splintered, some sagging to the ground. And then I saw it, a flicker of orange light maybe 50 yards up the trail, just past a bend. I told myself it was probably a lost hiker with a lantern or a flashlight. Maybe even some dumb teens trying to scare each other. I radioed back, told them I was going in to check it out. As I made my way up the trail, the crunch of gravel and dead leaves under my boots sounded impossibly loud. I kept glancing over my shoulder, swearing I heard faint shuffling behind me. But every time I turned, the woods stood still, dark and unmoving. The light stayed steady ahead, just out of reach, like it was leading me deeper in. I should have turned back. Instead, I kept moving. About 20 minutes up, the trail narrowed. I rounded a sharp curve where the trees thinned slightly, and that's when I saw him. A man standing by what looked like the collapsed remains of an old wooden bridge. He was facing away from me, motionless, wearing what looked like a ranger's uniform, or at least what used to be a ranger's uniform. The fabric was faded, sun-bleached, the sleeves shredded. His boots were caked with mud, one laced, the other flopping open like he'd forgotten how to tie it. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound firm, though my throat felt tight. "This trail's closed. You all right?" He didn't turn, didn't even flinch. The lantern at his feet burned with that strange, steady glow, not flickering like a regular flame, more like a dim, constant beam. I took a cautious step closer, hand instinctively moving to the radio clipped on my shoulder. "Sir, you need to come with me. This area is off limits." Still nothing. And then his head jerked like he'd been yanked by invisible strings, twisting slightly toward me, but not all the way. I couldn't see his face clearly. Just the outline of a sunken cheek, a mouth half open. His jaw twitched once, then again, like he was trying to speak but couldn't form words. That's when I noticed the patch on his shoulder. Pine Haven Ranger Service. But the logo, it was the old design, the one they stopped using decades ago. And his name tag, barely hanging on by a thread, read Murray. I know that name. I've seen it in the break room on a faded, yellowed missing persons notice from 1986. Ranger Charles Murray disappeared during a routine patrol on Elk Ridge Trail. Never found. Presumed dead. I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest, and then he turned fully. I can't describe his face. Not really. It wasn't rotted, not like a corpse, but it wasn't right either. His skin looked wrong, like wax left too close to a fire, sagging and warped. His eyes were wide, glassy, and his mouth hung open just enough to reveal cracked, dark teeth. He lifted one arm, pointing past me down the trail. His hand trembled violently, and when he finally spoke, his voice came out like a rasping whisper. "Turn back." I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't look back. Not until I was nearly to the truck, lungs burning, vision swimming. When I finally dared to glance over my shoulder, the trail was empty. The light was gone. The woods stood silent and dark as if nothing had ever been there. I drove back to the ranger station, shaking so hard I almost clipped a tree on the way down. I didn't report what I saw. I told them there was no one up there. No lights. Nothing. But the next night, when I was alone in the office, I went to the old records. I pulled Murray's file, and I found something I wish I hadn't. Scrawled on the last page, barely legible, was a note from the original search team. "Do not reopen Elk Ridge. If anyone sees lights or hears the name Murray, tell them to leave. Do not let them follow. I don't know what's up there. I just know I'm never going back." That night, even after I got home, small, creaky apartment above the old bakery in town, I just sat on the edge of the bed, boots still on, jacket still zipped up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept replaying it over and over, that sagging face, those trembling fingers pointing, that voice like dry leaves scraping across the ground. Turn back. God, by morning I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was exhaustion, long shift, thin mountain air, maybe even leftover adrenaline. I hadn't eaten much that day, hadn't drunk enough water. Rangers sometimes joked about trail madness, the way your mind plays tricks on you when you're alone too long in the woods. I wanted to believe that's all it was. But then the messages started. The first came through the park's central radio midday. "Unit 4, check in." I pressed the mic. "4 here." "We got another report," dispatch crackled back. "Hikers said they saw a ranger up by the old Elk Ridge overlook." My stomach dropped. "That can't be right," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "That trail's blocked. No one should be up there." That's what we told them, but they were pretty insistent. Said the guy was in uniform, waving them down. I almost dropped the mic. My fingers felt ice cold. I'll take a look." I didn't want to go. Every bone in my body screamed at me to turn off the radio, make up an excuse, do anything else. But I'd been a ranger long enough to know you can't ignore a call. So I went. The drive out was even worse this time. The air felt heavier, like the sky was pressing down on the forest. My ears kept popping the way they do when you're gaining elevation, except I wasn't. I was heading across a familiar flat stretch. It was like the pressure was wrong somehow, like the atmosphere was off just around that part of the park. I reached the overlook trailhead by late afternoon. It was quiet, way too quiet. Usually, you hear at least some bird chatter, maybe the distant knock of a woodpecker, squirrels rustling in the underbrush. Today, nothing, just dead air. I stepped onto the path, moving slow, boots crunching through frostbitten leaves. The trees here were old, Towering lodgepole pines mixed with ancient Douglas fir, their bark blackened and scarred from wildfires decades past. The trail twisted ahead, pale and narrow, half swallowed by creeping vines and roots. About halfway up, I saw it. A boot print. Fresh. Not from a hiker. Too heavy. Too wide. More like a work boot. Ranger issue. My heartbeat spiked. I crouched down, fingers brushing the dirt. There was a faint drag mark too, like whoever made the print had stumbled or limped. I followed the trail carefully, every step feeling like I was walking into a trap. The light was fading fast. Twilight in the woods is a strange thing. Shadows thicken and everything feels closer, tighter, like the trees are leaning in to listen. At the crest of the ridge, I spotted something through the branches. A figure. Not moving, just standing there. I raised my voice. "Hey, park ranger here? Are you all right?" The figure didn't react. I forced myself forward. Closer. Now I could see he was facing away, just like before. Same uniform, old design, patch barely hanging on, same muddy boots. It was him. "Murray," I called out, throat dry. The figure twitched. My breath hitched. I took a shaky step back, instinct roaring in my chest. And then, in a voice like brittle paper, "You shouldn't be here." I wanted to run. God, I wanted to turn and run, but my legs locked up. My mouth opened, trying to form words, but nothing came out. He turned slightly, enough that I could see the ruined edge of his face, cracked skin, sunken eyes, the corners of his mouth torn upward in a grotesque, slack smile. "Go back." And then, behind him, deeper in the trees, something moved. I don't know what it was. I couldn't see it clearly. Just a shape, tall, thin, gliding between the pines, barely making a sound. My brain scrambled, trying to make sense of it. Another person? An animal? But no, it was too tall, too smooth. Almost human, but not. I stumbled backward, heart hammering against my ribs. Murray's head snapped toward the movement, and for the first time I saw something flicker across his ruined face. Panic. He lifted one arm, pointing frantically at me. "Go." That broke the spell. I turned and ran. I don't remember the sprint back down the trail. I don't remember the drive. I just remember bursting into the ranger station, slamming the door behind me, chest heaving, lungs on fire. One of the other rangers, Sarah, looked up from her paperwork. "Jesus, you look like hell. What happened?" I tried to speak, but all I could manage was a broken, breathless whisper. "Something's up there." She frowned, confused. "On Elk Ridge? I thought you said it was just a dead trail." I shook my head. "No, there's something on that mountain." She opened her mouth, probably to tell me to calm down, but just then the radio crackled. "Unit 4, come in." It was dispatch. I snatched up the mic. "This is 4. A pause. Then, in a voice I swear to God sounded just like mine, distorted and slow. "Don't leave." I dropped the mic. Sarah's face went pale. We both just stared at each other. The static from the radio filled the room, the words echoing in the back of my skull. Don't leave. I didn't sleep that night either. And I knew, deep in my gut, this wasn't over. I didn't go into work the next day. I told them I was sick, called Sarah early, voice shaking, said I had chills, fever, whatever I could think of. She sounded surprised but didn't push. Honestly, I think she was relieved. Maybe she thought I needed a break after the weirdness yesterday. But the truth is, I didn't want to be anywhere near the park. I stayed holed up in my apartment, blinds drawn, sitting on the couch with the TV on, just for background noise. Netflix played some dumb cooking show on loop, but I wasn't watching. I just sat there staring at the wall, replaying everything over and over. Murray's face, that thing behind him moving through the trees, the voice on the radio. My voice, warped and slow, telling me, don't leave. By evening, I thought maybe I was cracking up. I even Googled stress-induced hallucinations, paranoia, auditory distortions, anything to explain what was happening. Maybe it was burnout, or maybe I just spent too much time alone in the woods. I was halfway convincing myself of that when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? At first, just static. Then a faint voice, barely audible over the hiss. Come back. I slammed the phone down so hard it bounced off the coffee table. I didn't sleep again. By 3 a.m., I was pacing the apartment, sweaty, jittery, jumping at every creak and car passing outside. I knew I couldn't stay like this. I needed answers. and there was only one place I was going to get them. By dawn, I was driving back toward Pine Haven. I kept telling myself I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I'd just swing by the ranger station, pull the old files, maybe talk to some of the senior guys. Hell, maybe I'd even tell Sarah what was going on. She'd seen how shaken I was. Maybe she'd believe me. But as soon as I pulled into the lot, I saw the station door hanging open. My stomach knotted. I killed the engine, stepped out carefully, listening. The place was quiet, except for the soft rattle of the wind through the flagpole. "Hello?" I called softly. "Sarah?" No answer. Inside, the lights were flickering. Papers were scattered across the floor. Chairs knocked over. Someone's coffee mug lay shattered on the ground. Dark liquid pooled beneath. I edged toward the back office, where we kept the records. My boots crunched softly over the mess. I reached for the handle and froze. On the door, scratched deep into the wood, were the words, "Stay away from the ridge." My breath hitched. I pushed inside. The office was a disaster zone. Filing cabinets yanked open, folders whipped apart. But one thing caught my eye. An old cardboard box shoved into the corner, half buried under loose files. I dragged it out. Inside were photographs, yellowed, curling at the edges. Black and white shots of the park from decades ago. Rangers standing proudly at trailheads. Groups posing near waterfalls. Smiling faces by the old ranger station that had burned down years ago. And then, near the bottom, I found something different. A photo of Murray. He looked younger, clean-shaven, smiling awkwardly at the camera, one hand resting on a tree trunk. But behind him, just barely visible, was a shadow. Not a trick of the light. Not a person. A shape. Tall, thin, smooth. Almost human. I felt a cold sweat break out down my back. My fingers trembled as I pulled out another photo. This one from a search party. Rangers standing in a line, flashlights pointed into the dark, faces tense. Again, in the distance, the shape, watching. I slammed the box shut. That's when I heard the bang. I spun, heart hammering. The front door of the station was swinging open, slamming hard against the wall in the wind. No, not the wind. A figure stood just outside. I barely saw it. Just a flash. Ranger uniform, faded, ragged, face pale and sunken. Murray. He stood there, half shrouded in shadow, one hand raised, trembling. I could barely hear it, but his lips moved. "Behind you." I turned, chest clenching, and saw for the briefest moment the reflection in the office window. Tall, thin, smooth, no face, no eyes. It was right behind me. I didn't think. I bolted, ran straight out the back door through the trees, stumbling over roots and brush, branches clawing at my arms and face. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just ran. By the time I reached my truck, my breath was coming in sharp, ragged gasps. I fumbled with the keys, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to crack my ribs open. When I finally peeled out of the lot, tires skidding over gravel, I dared a glance back at the station. Empty. No figure. No shadow. But just as I turned onto the main road, I saw something in the rearview mirror. For a split second, standing at the edge of the trees. Tall, thin, smooth. Watching. I don't know what it wants, but I know it's not done with me yet. I didn't go home. After I tore out of the Pine Haven lot, I just kept driving. Past the park boundary, past the small grocery store where the locals buy their bait and beer. Past the gas station that always smells like burnt coffee. I didn't even know where I was headed. I just needed to move. By the time I stopped, I was 2 hours south in a Walmart parking lot, hands shaking on the steering wheel, chest tight like I'd been holding my breath the entire drive. I sat there as the sun dipped behind the mountains, watching families shuffle in and out of the store, listening to the faint, hollow hum of some teenager's bass-heavy music thumping from a nearby car. It should have felt normal. It should have been comforting. But it wasn't. Even here, surrounded by people, I felt it. Like something was standing just out of sight, just beyond the corners of my vision, watching, waiting. I pulled out my phone, scrolling aimlessly, looking for something to ground me. I even pulled up Murray's missing person file again, rereading the details, like maybe I'd missed something. Patrol gone wrong, radioed in his location, never returned, declared missing after 48 hours. Except they did find something. I dug back into the search reports I'd photographed earlier, flicking through the images until I found the small, crumpled note they'd logged. Do not let anyone follow. What the hell did that mean? Was Murray warning me? Or was he part of this? Now I sat there, the question swirling in my brain like dirty water down a drain, until my phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. Again. I froze for a long moment, just staring at the screen. The little green accept button seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Against every ounce of common sense, I answered. Hello? No static this time, just breathing. Slow, shallow, wet sounding. Then a whisper, low and cracked, like someone speaking through a broken mouth. You're already marked. My stomach lurched. I hung up so fast I nearly dropped the phone. For a few minutes, I just sat there shaking, trying to slow my breathing. I wanted to call someone, a friend, another ranger, even the sheriff. But who the hell would believe me? Hi! Yeah! I think a dead ranger and some faceless thing are following me. Yeah, that'd go over well. Instead, I forced myself to think. If whatever this was had attached itself to me, how did I break it? The only thing that made sense was going back. I didn't want to. God, I did not want to. But if I just kept running, how long before it found me anyway? I waited until full dark before I turned the truck around. The highway back to Pine Haven was a black ribbon winding through endless pine and spruce. Every now and then, headlights from an oncoming car would flash by, momentarily lighting the trees, making me jump every time I thought I saw movement at the edge of the road. By midnight, I was back at the park boundary. The gates were closed. I parked the truck, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cold. The wind whispered through the trees, sending dry needles skittering across the pavement. Somewhere far off, a lone owl called. The rest was silence. I climbed the locked gate, boots slipping slightly on the icy metal, and dropped down on the other side. The park stretched out ahead, dark and still. My breath puffed out in clouds as I hiked toward the trailhead. And then, a light just ahead. Flickering orange. Lantern light. I crept forward slowly, heart pounding in my chest, every instinct screaming at me to stop. And there he was, Murray, standing at the mouth of the Elk Ridge Trail, same tattered uniform, same ruined face. He raised one hand, trembling, and for the first time I saw his eyes clearly. They were wide, terrified, not at me, but at something behind him. He mouthed one word, run, and then I heard it. A dragging sound like something impossibly tall sliding through the trees, not walking, not stepping, gliding. I stumbled back, but my boots slipped on the frost and I hit the ground hard, breath knocked from my lungs. From where I lay, I could just barely see past Murray, and in the shadows beyond, it was there. The shape, tall, thin, smooth, no face, no eyes, no mouth, but I felt it watching me. It raised one long, impossibly thin arm and pointed not at me, at Murray. Murray turned sharply, mouth opening in a silent scream, and in an instant he was gone, like smoke sucked into a vacuum. No sound, no flash, just gone. I scrambled to my feet, sprinting back toward the gate, lungs burning, legs shaking. I could hear it behind me. Not footsteps, but a pressure. A pull, like the very air was bending, warping, chasing. I didn't stop until I hit the gate, nearly falling as I climbed over, tearing my jacket on the barbed top. When I landed on the other side, I didn't look back. I ran straight for the truck, slammed the door, and peeled out onto the highway, tires screeching. And for a long time, I just drove. I don't remember how long, maybe hours, maybe all night. But by the time I stopped, the sun was just starting to rise, pink and gold creeping over the mountains. I sat there shaking, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something move in the back seat. But when I turned, the seat was empty. I don't know what it wants, but I don't think I left it behind. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of stepping into my dark, narrow apartment, drawing the blinds, turning off the lights, it made my skin crawl. I kept picturing that empty space behind me in the rearview mirror, imagining the faintest shift of a shadow, the slightest creak of floorboards under weight that shouldn't be there. So I drove, all morning, all afternoon. I pulled through Starbucks twice, not because I was hungry, but because the chatter of the workers, the hiss of the espresso machine, the ambient noise, It made me feel normal for brief moments. I didn't tell anyone. Not Sarah. Not my supervisor. Not the sheriff. Hell, not even the guy at the drive-through window who gave me a second cup by mistake and joked, "Long night, huh?" If I opened my mouth, it all comes spilling out. And I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. By early evening, I found myself parked outside a Walmart again. This time in a neighboring town. I watched shoppers push carts stacked with bottled water, toilet paper, snacks, garden mulch, just everyday, boring stuff. I craved that mundanity like oxygen. My phone buzzed. Blocked number. I squeezed it in my hand so hard I thought the screen would crack. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but I didn't press it. It stopped ringing. And then a text. "You can't run." No punctuation. No capital letters. I felt bile rise in my throat. I shut the phone off and tossed it onto the passenger seat, forcing myself to breathe. My hands were shaking again, a fine, uncontrollable tremor. I ran my palms over my face, willing myself to think, to do something. I didn't know what. Then, tap, tap, tap. I jolted. Someone was at the window. A man, mid-40s maybe, scruffy beard, wearing a green hiking jacket and cargo pants. He smiled awkwardly when I jumped, holding up both hands like, "Sorry, sorry." I cracked the window. "Hey, sorry, man," he said, voice a little hoarse. "Didn't mean to startle you." "It's fine," I mumbled. "Just, are you a ranger?" His eyes flicked to the gear on my passenger seat, the Pine Haven jacket, the radio, the battered park map. "Yeah," I said warily. His face shifted, lips tightening. "You were at Pine Haven last night, weren't you?" My stomach dropped. "How do you know that?" "I was there too." He glanced around as if checking who was nearby. Saw the light up on Elk Ridge. Saw something else too. I stared at him, pulse hammering in my ears. He leaned in slightly. "I don't know what you saw, man, but it's following me too." A rush of cold hit my spine. We sat there in silence for a second. I looked him over, trying to gauge if this was some weird joke or a desperate, grasping truth. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed dark with exhaustion. His hands gripping the window edge trembled faintly. "What did you see?" I asked quietly. His jaw worked. "I don't even know. I was hiking up near the old trail, heard something moving, saw a lantern. I thought maybe someone was lost. But then..." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I ran," he finished. "I've been running since." A thought hit me, sharp, electric, terrifying. If he was marked too, maybe we could figure this out together. Maybe we weren't completely alone in this. I killed the engine, unlocked the door, and stepped out. "Let's talk," I said. He nodded, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Yeah, okay. My car is just over here." I followed him, heart pounding, every nerve on edge. We crossed the parking lot toward a dusty gray Subaru parked under one of the flickering overhead lights. He fumbled with his keys, hands shaking worse now, and I caught the faintest tremor in his voice as he said, "I don't know how to stop this, man. I haven't slept in 2 days. I keep thinking." Click. He unlocked the door, and that's when I saw it through the back window in the reflection. It was standing behind us. Tall, thin, smooth. No face. My throat closed up, and before I could even yell, he turned just in time to see it. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The thing raised one arm, long and jointless, pointing, not at him, not at me, but at the car. For one awful moment, I saw his face twist in realization, sheer, unfiltered terror. And then, like smoke in the wind, he was gone. Just gone. His keys clattered to the ground. The only sound in the empty lot. I staggered back, chest heaving, heart in my throat. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but my legs locked. The thing didn't move. It just stood there, watching, waiting, and then it raised its hand again, this time pointing at me. My vision blurred, and a roaring sound filled my head like rushing water. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the ground, gasping, clawing at the pavement as if I could hold onto the world. And then, as suddenly as it started, it was gone. The lot was empty. The Subaru sat there unlocked, abandoned. And I was alone. Alone, but marked. I don't remember how I got back to the truck. I don't remember starting the engine or pulling onto the road or even driving the first 20 miles. I just remember the feeling, that hollow, ringing emptiness inside my chest, like something had been scooped out of me. like my body was running on fumes, the shell of a person just barely holding together. By the time I realized where I was going, the sign was already in front of me. Pine Haven National Park, closed for winter season. The gates loomed up, chains tangled around the bars. I sat there in the cab, watching the trees sway in the wind, headlights carving faint shapes in the underbrush. I knew it was a trap. I knew going back was insane. But what was the alternative? Keep running until it took me? Sit in some motel room until I faded out like the man in the Walmart lot? I stepped out of the truck. The cold hit me like a slap, sharp and biting, but it barely registered. My fingers worked numbly at the gate, pulling at the chains until they gave just enough for me to slip through. And then I was walking back toward Elk Ridge, back toward the trail that had been closed since 1986. The woods were silent, except for the faint whisper of wind. My boots crunched over the frostbitten dirt, the air sharp in my lungs. Every step felt heavier, like something was pressing against me. Not just the cold, not just the fear, but something bigger, thicker. Like the very air was closing in. I reached the mouth of the trail, and there, waiting, was Murray. Same sunken eyes, same tattered uniform, same trembling hand raised in warning. But this time I didn't stop. I stepped closer. His mouth opened, jaw shaking, that voice scraping out like dry leaves. "You can't." I shook my head. "I don't have a choice." His hand dropped. His shoulders sagged like some invisible weight had crushed the last bit of fight out of him. And then slowly, he turned. He walked ahead, lantern flickering dimly in his hand, leading me up the trail. I followed. We climbed higher, past the broken switchbacks, past the dead trees and overgrown brush, until we reached the ridge. The wind howled here, sharp and endless, rattling through the burned-out trees. And waiting at the top it stood, tall, thin, smooth. No face, no mouth, no eyes, but I felt its gaze lock onto me. For a moment, Murray stood between us, lantern shaking, shoulders tense, and then the thing lifted one long, jointless arm and pointed, not at me, at him. Murray's body jerked, head snapping up, mouth opening in a silent scream as his form began to unravel, pieces fading like ash in the wind. I lunged forward instinctively, reaching out. No! But my hand passed straight through him, catching only cold, empty air. In a heartbeat, he was gone, just like the others. And then the thing turned its hand, pointing at me. I fell to my knees, chest heaving, heart slamming so hard I thought my ribs would crack open. I could feel it pulling at me, the same unraveling force, the same hollow emptiness creeping into my bones. But then a voice, low, faint, right by my ear. "Run." I don't know how. I don't know where the strength came from. But my legs moved. I ran. I ran like hell, stumbling, crashing through the underbrush, breath burning in my throat. Behind me, I could feel the air twisting, warping, the forest bending in impossible ways. Trees groaned and split. The ground seemed to ripple under my feet. But I ran, all the way back down the ridge, all the way through the forest, all the way to the truck. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. When I finally reached the truck, I slammed the door shut, fumbled the keys, and peeled out onto the main road, driving faster than I ever have in my life. The forest fell away behind me, dark and silent. I didn't stop. Not until I crossed the county line. Not until I saw the familiar glow of gas stations, fast food joints, Walmart, Costco, the real world bleeding back in, grounding me. But even now, even as I sit here in a crowded McDonald's parking lot, surrounded by people, music, lights, I can still feel it. Watching, waiting. I don't know why it hasn't finished the job. I don't know if it's done with me. But I know one thing. I'll never go back. Not to Pine Haven, not to Elk Ridge, not to that trail, because some places, they were never meant to be reopened.